The main character of this news is a young dark-haired guy with a strong physique, Ridge's Tower. A well-known legend tells that it is a horned giant who created the world. The old narrators claim that it was once a foreign tower that fell right from heaven. And according to the legend of the priests of Abysad, this tower was left by the gods themselves. The Soya has only a year to overcome the dungeon and get the 56th floor. Whether it is a simple walk or a difficult test, the hero does not know yet. Soybeans go to the dungeon to get a new place. The young man turned to a special organization. He told the employee that he was ready to go to another world, if he was paid for it. Soy earlier heard that this man had financial difficulties because of his younger sister. That is why he was invited to talk. As it turned out, the interlocutor had already listed Soybean advance, so it was necessary to start in 2 hours. He got the phone to make sure. Indeed, the account already had a considerable amount of money. At this point, the interlocutor added that if the union does not return from the other, his sister will pay compensation and reward for non-disclosure. He explained in detail the Svai everything necessary, and asked if any questions remained. However, Sawai seems to have nothing to add. Why did he go to the open portal at the same time? When all the preparations were completed, the employees had to reset containers and robots into the portal. This is the first time in 18,946 confirmed the existence of another world. In 1951, the leading countries of the world introduced their troops. But this led to a catastrophe, the scale of which is difficult to imagine. Subsequently, these events became the basis of a high-profile scandalous book. In 1956, the troops were sent for the second time, but they were also destroyed. Only the last words of commanders remained from that operation. Everything was prepared, and SOA resolutely jumped into the portal. He was engulfed by alarming anticipation. No matter how cool, this proposal seemed suspicious. But for the sake of the younger sister, Soa did not even hesitate. He immediately agreed. His affairs did not go up. Fortunately, SOE managed to get to another world safely. The main reason why everything goes in the SE is that half of the containers began to get and thunders. The second problem is 5 people who jumped with the SEE disappeared. Finally, all 3 required robotic helpers are destroyed, with the causes of their breakdown and remained a mystery. One of the robots, if you can say so, had a good heart. In 1957, the development of artificial intelligence began, mainly for household purposes. However, the list of causes for concern, unfortunately, did not decrease. When one of the robots approached, at this point, Soya noticed that Macon could be transferred to another mode, so he decided to change her setup and activate the fighting program. When Isola went to a new regime, the robot asked Soybeans to act together with the participants of the project. McKean has many different modes, and one of them is Isola. After that, the robot addresses Soybeans to the question of whether there were losses among people after passing the portal. Soya explains that he remained. The rest disappeared without a trace. He adds that he explored everything within 5 kilometers, but did not find any trace of other people. After that, Isolin asked if he could get help. The robot replied that it was impossible, because to maintain the portal you need to spend too much energy. He also reported that the next opening of the portal will only take place in 79 to 20 hours. Such a development did not please him at all. Isola has already released a swarm of drones to explore the area within 20 kilometers. Soy asked Isol to find other team members, but she refused. She said there was no reason to do this. Soybeans also decided to evaluate their chances of success. Given the available resources and capabilities of the group, the likelihood of reaching the goal is only 0.2%. SOLA also noted that according to the 24th law of robotics, the robot has the right to use all its resources for the sake of saving human life. After that, the robot asked the Soy if he wanted to cancel the project. He decided not to give up and continue working on the project. Soya believed that there was no point in despairing and just sitting with his hands, because they already have to do everything they intended here. After his decision, the Isola accepted the information, turned off the support mode, and activated the main system. Wished the Soya luck. The robot activated the main system and again became a mat. At that moment, the soybeans were calmly screwing tea. Suddenly, Machina warned him about unexpected guests. Immediately afterwards, a mysterious bubble came from the river. In a moment, a monster jumped out of the water with a spear alert. They were faced with a fishman. It was evident that she was not going to attack Soy. Within a few minutes, Soy fed the creature and told him that he was a stranger in these parts. The creation has long tasted nothing from the earth offered by this stranger. I advised him to heat the soup because he was afraid that he would cool. However, the guy with gills briefly replied that his races are contraindicated in high temperatures. Even the cooled soup seems to be burning for him. At this moment, the hero wondered why this man speaks with him so calmly, because almost no one owns Japanese here. The stranger explained that he was a priest. Although he comes from the abyss, he was lucky to get Babylon's blessing. Who is Babylon? The hero did not understand. So he looked at the stranger with surprise. So he decided to tell everything to the boy. The essence is simple. In this world there is God, and it was the priests who asked him to give them the opportunity to understand strangers. If the interlocutor thinks in some language, the priests are able to understand most words and match the same language. This discovery was quite impressed by the hero. The hero wondered if all the inhabitants of this world have such blessings. The priest explained that it is not uncommon. Anyone who has concluded an agreement with God can receive a similar gift. Then Soya realized, if he is understood by others, he will be able to find like-minded people and go with them to the dungeon. The stranger removed his necklace from his neck and stretched it. The soybean took the necklace. The priest explained that for the followers, Grisnasis is a special sign of greeting. If Soy refuses, the next meeting they will become enemies. After weighing all the circumstances, the soybean accepted the gift and decided to make a gesture in response. He fell into his things, found sunglasses, and briefly stretched them with a priest. The priest took the sunglasses of soybean and immediately tried on them. He was explained that though the glass and the dark, because of them, it is still clearly visible. It took him very much, and he looked with interest in glasses. But suddenly he remembered that he needed to hurry back, otherwise he would be covered. When the priest rose from his chair, he asked in Sava how long he plans to stay in these parts. The Sava replied that he would probably peak here for about a year. He thought that the priest was hinting that the camp was forbidden here, so he decided to clarify the issue. However, the priest assured him that the camp could be stopped if it is not for long. In the end, the priest confessed that he first met a person who did not cry, seeing him, but also treated with food. So he decided to introduce himself. As it turned out, the name of this creature is a Getbot, and it comes from Magubafel. He also introduced himself and noted that he came from Japan. After that, the Getbot added that their lands are located 6 stations from the river. Pointing the hand at the distance, he explained that in the direction of crossing this land, the kingdom of Lemuria is located. Also nearby, the large forest, the possession of elves. Gatbot advised soybeans to stay away from this forest. Otherwise, it could be dangerous. Soya thanked for the warning, and their conversation ended. The boys said goodbye. At this point, Makina reported that soybeans' chances of success increased to 0.6%. Although the increase was insignificant, the guy was still happy. For a while, soybeans were able to reach the Humor Kingdom. After a brief reflection, he turned on the function of distant navigation and set up a stable reception signal. Thanks to this function, Savia realized that there were about 2 kilometers left to the dungeon, their ultimate goal. Looking at the massive dungeon, which seemed very close, Savia was hard to believe that in fact, there is such a distance between them. A little more time has passed. Savia overcame these 2 kilometers and finally got the entrance to the dungeon. Inside, the Savias received a message from Makina. The first floor of the Otorigi Tower is subdued. Looking around, Soy noticed portals. As Makina said, these are ancient technologies of this world. Soybean came to one of the racks. A girl stood on the tabletop. Soya explained that for the first time I would like to find out where to go. The girl pointed to another rack and reported that the registration of new adventurers is there. The guy approached the girl for a stable registration. She immediately stated that he could not get to the dungeon. This is impossible. Surprised and indignant, Sawyer asked the cause. The girl explained that, without having a contract with God, she cannot allow him to go to the dungeon. Realizing that he would not be able to get into the dungeon, Soybeans fell into despair. It seemed to him that everything was lost. The girl from the counter agreed to go with Soya in search of God the next day. Nakina considered it a good achievement. However, the Soy itself remained depressed. However, he was glad to have money. In the container there were metal rods, which Soy, realizing that these attackers were aggressive, Soy quickly asked Makina how many of them. Makina replied that 3 of them. Vakina added that the attackers intend to chase Soy after exchange. She also quickly determined the enemy's location. There were only 5 meters to direct contact. Time went. The owl was already drawn to his machine gun. Soon, 3 chunky men surrounded Soy. The guy immediately asked them what could help. One of the men reached out and ordered the Soya to give money, promising to leave him alive. Saya in turn pulled only 1 coin and threw it away. He was healthy, returned to the direction where the coin flew. Sawa immediately rushed into the attack. Grabbing the machine, he knocked out the jaw with a powerful blow to the attacker. Without spending time, he returned the weapon for the rest of the 2, and, pouring the barrel on them, shot several times, shot their legs. All 3 were already lying on the ground. Machina reported that the giants were finally neutralized. Tina also warned Soyu that someone was approaching him. Machina suggested that it was probably the residents who were attracted by the sounds of shots. Then the Soyu asked Machina to turn on the locator. The guy was already going to retreat, as suddenly from the darkness, they began to watch him. On that day, Soya went to the dungeon again. The girl who announced to help him immediately stated that he was late, and she had to wait too long. It turned out that the girl's name is Efto, so I asked her why she was here. Efto answered that she was coming from the west, because this path was the most convenient. However, Savia felt that Eve never gave a true answer to his questions. Eve paid attention to Savia's necklace, the same as he was presented with a fisherman. She confessed that she felt Soya settled somewhere outside the city. However, the Soya denied, they say, it did not mean it at all. The Soya asked again, Elfto, why are you waiting here in this place? It was this question that did not give him rest. In the end, they agreed that the soybeans visited the soy. These words were angered by the girl. She insisted that she just worried her first job, so she decided to take a little stroll in the open air. For some reason, soybeans felt guilty for what had happened and sincerely apologized. After that, the pillar immediately followed Ivto. On the way, the guy asked if a foreigner could conclude an agreement with God. Ivto explained that it doesn't matter to God. As it turned out, such cases have happened earlier. You were brought to this place and assured that it is best for beginners. It is Vinical who is the adventure god who left many legends. Everyone was certain, if the soybean contracts in this temple, he would open the way to the dungeon. However, looking at the building, soybeans doubted whether the temple was really. It was more like a tavern more. However, the veteran assured that it was a temple, even if people just drink. The characters came inside and sat down by the rack. Soybean was sure that it was really tavern. However, the veteran objected, explaining that Nicola's wind exchanges the thirst for becoming a new adventurer in the spirit of research. Glory turns in. Soy was approached by a chunky man standing behind this peculiar shrine. He asked the Soy if he really dreamed of becoming an adventurer. Soybo confidently replied that it was his sincere desire. Then the man suggested contracting, and Soya agreed with joy. I didn't even think that everything would be so simple. At this point, the guy decided to introduce himself. He was called Rasta al-Razva. After he named his name, Rasta said solemnly, Adele Wines, the power given to me. Let your compass always point the way to new adventures. Let your heart remain indomitable until death. If you are ready to accept this, put your hand on the book and name your name. Soy did everything as Rast said. He put his palm on the book and clearly uttered his name. Suddenly, a bright flow of light escaped from the book. It was an end. Rasta said it was impossible. Then Sawi asked, why? Then he addressed Sawi. Do you dream? Sauya replied uncertainly that he really dreamed of something. The giant wondered if this dream is real and whether he was able to come true. He stressed that the adventures go only with those dreams that seem unattainable. God blesses those whose dreams cause other gods only a smile. Soybean does not have such a dream. Frankly, he will not become a real adventure seeker, so he should look for God elsewhere. Hearing this, Soybead. The giant noticed his mood and suggested that for 1 golden allow the boy to try to conclude a contract with the wind again. But Soy asked Rast to stop. When Nicola Soy visited a few more temples, what did the guy do for the act to achieve his goal? After all, everyone was refused. Unfortunately, Savias, everything ended in failure. Then he decided to apologize to her for his helplessness. The girl assured that she sincerely wanted to help, but the Sauya did not blame Efta. He was convinced that the problem lies exclusively in it. The auto was also depressed. She sat down and lowered her head. She was genuinely sorry for all their attempts with Savi. However, Savias tried to encourage the girl. He assured that such things happen in life. Nevertheless, he wanted to invite an auto for dinner. She immediately got up after the invitation, shaking dust and fixing her clothes. I decided that she would not hurt to try again. It would be great to meet again. She even surprised how quickly you changed. Suddenly, the Savier heard someone's voice. Why did you force the girl to stay behind her head in such a place? She is pregnant from you? Concealed, the Soya turned sharply to the source of sound. And at the same moment the voice came again. What do you look at? I'm here. Lowering his gaze, he immediately noticed it. He froze with surprise. The cat talked to him. He did not suffer as soon as possible to announce the vet. Soy shouted to the event and looked at her. The girl looked frightened to death. Everything she has said is that they are better transferred to tomorrow. And the next day she will meet that guy on the reception, even before SOE is suspected. And he can even flee, leaving the SOE alone with a cat who can talk. The veterinarian still did not understand what had happened. And the cat, in turn, appealed to Eve only as a cowardly horned creature. Seeing the soybean face, Eve turned to him as a man. Soy looked around and asked the cat. The cat finally introduced to this. Her name was Mr. She said she witnessed how Soya had dealt with Gopniki and seemed to be greeted with something. She claims that soybeans will certainly spoil, so only his death could correct everything. But despite this, Mrs. Lanka decided to enjoy the soybean, and said that she was enough if she served her by the end of her days. So he did not worry at all and decided to relax because tomorrow had to get up early. The cat jumped on Soy. She assured that she was able to save him, but Soya himself went around. He was only worried that Miss Lanica could damage his cloak. So Miss Lanica decided to simplify the conditions. She promised to forgive Soya if he fed her. However, he did not like the perseverance of the cat at all, so he went away again. Miss Lanica tried to stop the boy, calling for a hurry. But the Soya did not even look back, and eventually Miss Lanica fell to the ground. He felt guilt and asked in Miss Lanica whether she was hungry. But lazy lying, Miss Lanica said she had not eaten for about 15 years. Then, the Soya realized, if she leaves her here, then the woman would just die, and it did not give him rest. That is why he suggested that Miss Lanitza go with him. At the same moment, Miss Lanica immediately broke into her paws, and without hesitation agreed to join Soya on a trip. So, the result of the day for soybeans became quite predictable. The next day, soybeans were already in a pleasant company. He prepared a meal for a ghetto. Jillo, seafood fried in oil. Since the ghetto-beth could not eat hot, Soy specifically cooled the dish for him. It turned out that the get-beth came to soybean not just, he was invited. Therefore, Soya thanked him for responding to an invitation. Soybean also apologized for treating a ghetto-di from seafood dishes, but the guest was enthusiastically noted that the soybean people were really impressive. After all, his own race does not use fire and almost never tastes like such dishes, so such treatments for the ghetto-bet are of particular value. Discussing Sawi, Getbeth carelessly noted that this dish was barely dragging on 1 gold coin, and he would simply throw the rest. Sawa wondered what silver and bronze coins did not please him. It was at this point that the room filled the appetizing, seductive aroma. After the Shina's announcement, the pussy ordered the soybeans to prepare food for her. Seeing the cat, the Gav took off his sunglasses and looked closely at Miss Lanaki. He also asked the soybean that it was for a cat. The soy presented Miss Lanak, calling her a prodigy. Hatbed was genuinely surprised, because this cat was talking. Soybo brought Miss Lanak to her plate. Meanwhile, Hatbod tried to remember where it heard this name. Miss Lanak seemed to him. Askanika was angry in her plate. Having learned from Sawyer that it was a fish cut into small pieces, she only flicked more. She was annoyed that Sawyer did not care at all to prepare the dish well. Sawyer just shrugged and suggested that the Masliania just not eat if she did not taste. However, Maslianic denied that it did not mean it. At this point, Getbod tried hard to remember where he had heard the name Maslianic. But in the end, he came to the idea that a full stomach did not think. The morning searches of God ended in failure. After them, the Sogi and Avet went again to the so-called Wind of the Wind, planning to eat. Avet noted that she did not expect anything else from this morning, while Soga confessed that she had hoped the first dish was served on the table. Soya told the girl that he had already taken off yesterday's gypsum. Hearing these words, the Otto was scared. She assured that this cat with a rough tongue and narrow eyes will gradually pull out the whole soul from soybeans, Only then did Soy realize that Eve did not like cats at all. Accumulating food, Eve finally confessed that she was once adventurous, although now you will not say, her appearance is completely different. Such words seemed funny, so he laughed. At this point she gave herself to Makin. I immediately wondered what happened. Instead, Makina ordered Sob to return to the camp immediately. The guy was confused and could not understand what was happening. Makina reported that they were attacked. Soye was overwhelmed by even more fear. In a few minutes, Saoya reached the camp. From all that belonged to him, only the mutilated things left and torn into pieces of tent. First of all, Soya ran to Masin and asked to turn on the strange eye. But Makina did not understand what it was about. He was unknown to him. Such a device is not familiar to him. The screen appeared on the screen. If you are using a new program, please contact your support. Then Soya decided to act decisively and try to activate the eye on his own. Fortunately, Makina managed to start. The eye or the subsystem was activated. The speed of work was only 30%. After that, the Soy ordered the scanning, marking the hole with red points. Makina confirmed the team and immediately began to survey the territory. At a distance of 100 meters of Masin, it did not find any living creatures. Then Soy asked who attacked the camp. Masina replied that it was a group of 3 men, and also arranged containers with weapons and medical supplies. Then Soy asked the Makins if he knew where the attackers are. Makina replied that he was able to throw a bug to one of them, and immediately demonstrated their location on the map. It was at this point that the Soya came across the mistress. She lay on the ground with a stomachable belly. He looked at the cat, remained silent. At that moment, Makina reported that the scanning of the terrain did not produce any results. The system capacity dropped to 5%. She advised the soybeans to hide and wait until the system recovers without making any decisions on its own. Soybeans felt that he was obliged to return stolen containers and valuable resources. He realized that the violators should be received by merit. In addition, he still has cartridges. So Soya turned to Makina, asking if he calmed down, but the system indicator had already shown 0%. Makina turned off. The soybean took off the glasses and apologized to Makina. He realized that he was assigned an almost impossible task. That is why soybeans went to the tractor. First of all, he unnoticed the coin through the lattice, attracting the attention of adventurers. Without thinking for a long time, Soya broke into a tavern with a machine ready. All adventurers immediately turned to a noisy guy, but Soybean did not delay a second. He immediately opened fire on 2 healthiers who had previously mocked him and destroyed his camp. The Sava snatched the gun and shot from the 3rd attacker, stopping it just on the spot. The bullet sewed his leg, and the giant fell hard on the floor. However, he did not get lost and reached for a sword, which was quite close. But the Sava quickly shot again, this time just in his hand. Then the Sava approached the main of the leaders, sighted a gun on him and calmly stated that he had several questions to him. The man just laughed in response. He then cast his gaze on Soya and noted that the foreigner was a really cool gun. At the same time, he reproacted that Soya was too condescending to adventure seekers. Suddenly, Soya got a strong blow to the chair directly on the head, then fell to the floor. He did not have time to understand how he was able to get up, give him bream, and even quietly move on. After all, the Soya had time to shoot him before. At that moment, the guy who wounded the Soya in his hand lifted it and showed it. Just in the eyes of the soybean, the spare wound began to tighten quickly. The avant-gardists argued that these toys were not affected by them, but Soya could not believe their own eyes. Looking at it, he sent these adventurers away. But the silky giant already swung his sword, preparing to strike the Soy. The sword was rapidly approaching the head of Soya, but the foreigner did not think to retreat. He just couldn't allow any travelers to despise themselves. In the city where adventure seekers gather, clashes between them are a common thing. In most cases, everything is decided by the Guild of Adventure Seekers, so said the experienced veteran. However, if a conflict arises between an adventure seeker and an ordinary person, who then goes into the situation? In the end, soybeans coped with all the violators of rest. They were slaughtered with a heavy chain, and was already going to go further, as suddenly came across 2 elves. It turned out that the elves were sisters. The younger staring at soybeans, noticing his serious injuries. Instead, the eldest stood up for her sister, warning her not to approach the stranger. The man only asked the girls to show where the police station was. The older sister already wanted to refuse him. The older girl explained the way to the boy in detail. You need to go straight until you see a tavern with a sign of a hunting horse. The police department will be quite nearby. At the same time, the younger sister wanted to help Soy a little, though she was against it. Having only time to thank the elves, Soybeans suddenly fainted. I woke up already in the depths of the camera because of a loud dispute. The angry was a veteran, who was indignant at a strange police behavior. At that moment, the Sava, barely audible, called Eve. She returned to her husband, grabbed the lattice and asked how he was feeling. He looked around and did not understand how he was in prison. Thinking, he remembered that when the Union attacked the police post Al-Qaeda, he was certain that he had already died. Soybeans felt severe pain throughout the body. The guard, looking at his torment, noted that the guy had long been died if it were not for the help of the elves who accidentally passed and provided him with treatment. At that moment, Soybeans mentioned those elfine women. In response, the security guard apologized to Soya for waking up in the camera. He also reported that Soybeans are accused of beating 3 dangerous adventurers who are now in a state that they cannot even speak. Soybean in turn asked the guard to listen to him. The young man assured that 3 of them stole his property. The guard then asked if Soybeans managed to return his belongings and whether he had evidence that these 3 were criminals. Soybean had no evidence. Lowering his head, he confessed to this guard. Although the evidence could have appeared if Makin had helped, there was no nearby. At that moment, the guard noted that the heir did not subordinate, namely the one who has not yet concluded an agreement with God. He said that all who are not subordinates were sent to the consul of the central continent. They are being sentenced to a sentence, either execution or use as experimental toys. The security guard confessed that he did not want to lead there, because it is a real adventure. He showed 2 adventurers from the guild, who turned in Soybeans. The security guard stated that he was passing Soybeans, because he was now left without divine protection. For a moment, Soybean even felt excitement. But suddenly, an unfamiliar voice came. It turned out that it was a girl, the head of the guild of the Lemure adventurers. She firmly stated that she would not make any exceptions, as it could hurt the reputation of the guild. With these words, the girl turned and hurried to the exit, noting that she still had many things. Eve immediately rushed her to stop. Eve asked her head to give another day to Soybean to try to find God again. However, the head denied, they say. No God will now want to conclude an agreement with Soy after he had already conducted a group of adventurers through the city. At this point, one of the guards ordered the ship to be sailed to the central continent. Then Savoy decided that his adventure had ended. Suddenly Savoy heard a familiar voice behind his back. I heard everything. The situation is not easy for you, isn't it? These words and the voice have stunned all those present, even Sava himself. Looking back, he recognized familiar hair. Aslia called Sava a fool and stated that he dug a pit illiterately. Although he invents his excuses, the south is already waste. Seeing Aslanix alive, Sava could not believe his own eyes. Aslia, in turn, explained that she was really dead, but only, in my soul, the fact that Miss Lannis was really a goddess. At that moment, the head of the guild Lemur told the story of how 3 majestic kingdoms flourished on the distant continent. But there was a woman who alone destroyed these 3 kingdoms. This is Mrs. Lenika. Her greatness became famous as the goddess of deception and treachery. The leader of the guild learned that all the followers of the Miss Lyonic had died. It was then that Mr. could ruthlessly declare that her innocent body no longer exists, and she became a mystical goddess. One way or another, Mr. spent several years, feeding only with rats and prism. In this part of the history of Mr. asked the Soybean whether she wanted to enter into a contract with her. The Soybean did not hesitate for a second, and agreed immediately. However, Mr. decided to make a bit of a little. She pretended not to know what to do with Soya, because he had long ignored her request and behaved boldly. It was at this point that the Soybean fell on her knees. He pleaded with Miss Lanik to enter into a contract with him, swearing that he was ready for everything for it. His voice sounded so loud that Miss Lanik even had hair. It was a secret Japanese ritual worship, a bow. In the end, Miss Lanik asked Soyu to stop this sight, because she was ashamed of the boy. Soy rose from his knees, rejoicing that his idea had worked. At that moment, Miss Lanika stated that all knightly traditions of ancient countries would adhere to. She asked Soyu to stand on her right knee, to touch his right shoulder with her left hand, and to lower her right palm on the ground and bow her head. Sua humbly executed all her instructions, after which Miss Lanica warned his head strictly until she allowed. At the same moment, as the darkness wrapped Soya, Miss Lanica's voice came. After sounding, she, a representative of the Dark Tribe, asked the question, "Become my sword that will fulfill all my aspirations. Sword without glory, in the blood and anxiety of the soul. Those who do not dare to deny my will show consent with their silence." Soybo was silent. The slave, the endless chain of conquest, which extends through generation, is eventually subordinated only to the attainable. Take everything you gave you, and assign what you have been stolen. Are you ready to swear? He did not deny my words, confirm their strength with silence. Answer this scoundrel with silence. Before you stands a person without a sword, without faith, and without humility. It was at this moment that the Mrs. Lianica appeared in front of Soybean in the human likeness. The shame is not afraid of the one who does not seek glory, who does not dream of dreams, and becomes strong when circumstances require it. You have accepted my choice and my mistakes. You carry a disaster with your own body, but do you only accept me? And your bones will be the embodiment of the humble reproach of my guilt. Saying this, Miss Lanica approached the face of the Union. Finally, Miss Lanica whispered the Union, "You are in the human likeness now. Give me completely." Hearing these words, Miss Lanica, having already turned into a cat, allowed Soybeans to get up. She solemnly announced that the agreement was concluded and warmly greeted her follower. The guard, who watched everything and saw Miss Lanica in the Huma, Miss Lanica and the boy left the car near the police post. The cat asked the guy what he was going to do with containers. Soya replied that the signal has not disappeared, so the containers were still somewhere nearby. While Soya was already in the store, he asked the audience to call the owner. The employees were interested in asking for what reason the Soya wanted to talk to the store owner. He explained that he wanted to buy things from another world that got to this store. Hearing this, the old woman and the young guy who met Soya were stunned. For a while, Soya was already sitting on the couch opposite the owner of the store. The owner assured that he had heard rumors about Soya, a stranger who literally stirred the whole city with his actions against 3 adventurers. For this moment, when asked about the meaning of his visit, the Soybean answered simply, "All the stolen things are in the warehouses of this owner." Deciding to change the topic of conversation, the owner began to praise the Soybean ability. He assured that Soybean has a hidden force that is difficult to grasp. The guy is not only bold, but also has valuable experience. However, the owner himself considered it rather misfortune than an advantage. All cases in the warehouses are resolved only by his order, so no one would call for help. No one would have time to appear. The owner wanted Soybeans to realize his hopeless position. He reproached the guy that he did not take the opportunity to hide the truth about himself when he had such an opportunity. On the other hand, he believed that there was no point in turning their things, because they would still be stolen again. Laughing, the owner noted that Sawyer is well aware of his situation. He only advised the foreigner to contact him next time before losing his belongings. The owner assured that he was always ready to buy items at an honest price. However, Sawyer did not see in this sense. In the end, he asked the owner to fulfill only one request. When asked what it was, Sawyer answered simply. He asked to open the window. The guard opened the window for the soybean. Sitting near the windowsill, the guy kept his breath, admiring the scenery behind the glass. Therefore, the Soya got a small device, the one that attaches to the stolen containers in case of emergency. Without hesitation, he pressed the button on his remote control, activating the mechanism of self-destruction. In a moment, a powerful explosion came under the windows of the owner's office. He froze with surprise and did not immediately realize what it had exploded. At that moment, the Savian noticed that the explosion had something magical. "I have only one question. The entire warehouse exploded?" The owner trembled, realizing that the building could be destroyed completely. He apologized to the owner and decided to complete the conversation. He needed to continue registration of documents for admission to the adventurers. Soya warned that he would appear here again tomorrow, and so he asked the owner to prepare well for his visit. And he left the area. Miss Laniker noted that soybeans were a disobedient guy, but Soy himself did not consider so. She herself came to the conclusion that to exercise evil for goodness is justice. But on the other hand, even the destruction of evil can also be considered evil. After a while, the Sawyer returned to the dungeon again to register in the Adventurers Guild. When he came to the guild employee, Sawyer finally heard the good news. He had already issued a temporary registration for him. The outing of the dungeon was to take place in exactly 2 days. This time is enough to prepare. Thanks to the employee, the sawyer was already going to go, but suddenly stopped. He told the employee that an explosion had recently occurred in the warehouse. Eve was worried and asked the sawyer not to go there better. However, the sawyer did not share with Eve all the details. On the 5th day, Machen was activated again. She immediately assessed the situation and, as they agreed with the soaring, supported his plan. Now the machine acted instead of Isola. She wondered in Soybean whether she needed to hand over control. He assured that everything is fine. Then Isola switched to the machine's function and asked Sol to explain the reason for the self-destruction of the captured weapon. He assured that this container is nothing, because he works himself. The Machina wondered what would happen if she had to hire guards. I think that people's trust is not sold for money. Instead, Machina was convinced that there would be enough robots for protection. But the sawyer understood. He would not only need a tracking for safety. Soybo asked Machina if he could lift his hand to a person. Machina denied that it is impossible. The second commandment of robotics strictly forbids work to harm people. Then the soy bared if he was mistaken. Machina reassured. Soybeans are right. Even if his actions seem wrong, he still remains right inside. After that, Machina noted that I could also take part in conversations with Saud today. But Sawyer abandoned this idea. He believed that Machina's help was enough, because I had no appropriate opportunities for such a role. These words even touched Machina a little. Then he lifted Miss Lanica and turned to Machina and Isola. The man announced that he removed from them a non-interference, and then presented a cat Machini, explaining that he was a goddess with whom he had concluded a contract, Mrs. Mislanik. Soya also asked Machin to add Miss Lanica to the service list. The Mislanians did not like this request, so she got out of the soybeans and pushed his glasses. As soon as Getbeck told about it, it became clear that everything went wrong. In the morning when he came, the soil had already disappeared and the camp was completely destroyed. He even confessed that he was thrown into the cold, so now he was interested in where Soya went. He apologized for the fact that he had disturbed Getbad, and he assured him that he was worried only because of the sudden disappearance of soybeans. In response, Soya explained that today he had to go to negotiations with a trading company. But before leaving, he had one question to Goatbad. He approached Getbad, looked at him just in the eye, and asked how much he sold his containers. How many Geatbad sold soy containers? As a result of a thorough inspection of the soy camp, he found that those adventure seekers could not steal containers on their own. The containers are waterproof, they can swim, but at the same time so heavy that it is almost impossible to move them. Earlier, there was a conversation between Soya and Getbad. Then Soybo genuinely admitted that he did not understand why this golden coin needed a Getbad. After all, the people of the Goatbad have all the gifts of the sea, and this is enough for life. Getbad also explained that his people need no relationship with people, so the situation was a little worried. Bed told Soybeans that he had 5 granddaughters. The youngest of them once rescued a man who was thrown ashore from a broken merchant vessel during a storm. After the girl pulled him on the land, she was so fascinated by this man that she did not talk to anyone more. Getbad's younger granddaughter disappeared without a trace. She snatched an artifact that made it possible to change the appearance, and of course, followed that man. From this story, Sawyer realized that it was a little like a fairy tale about the mermaid, and decided, if his grandson is happy, there is no reason to worry. One day he was called for exchange negotiations. Its association was related to the Alamis trade organization in Western Phoenix. Getbad received an offer that is difficult to refuse. A person-person fish in exchange for 4,000 gold. Now, after the soybean asked about containers, the Gavd did not say a word. Soy asegurado que él considera a Getbeda un buen hombre, porque él muestra una sincera preocupación por sus seres queridos. Most likely, the soybean Getbed is also honest. That is why it is so easy to use, and Soy did not want Getbed to regret it. However, Guy insisted, let him better call his price. Hatbed, barely nodding, replied, 20 gold, inexpensively. Soya thanked him for the answer, but still had another request. Soy asked Getbad to drown Macon's work if Soya, something happened, although the likelihood of it was quite small. In addition, he wanted Getobad to hand over the rest of the Miss Lanka fish if the soybean dies, and instead allowed him to sell all the rest of the catch. At that moment, Getbad, drooled the words of soybeans, and wondered if he really trusted him. Without any hesitation, the soybean replied that he was trusting him. At the same moment, Getbad bowed his head, his hands trembled. Soybo forgot him on behalf of the goddess of the treachery of Mislanix. On a certain day, soybeans, as promised, went to a trading company for negotiations. The negotiations were solemn. Two groups were lined up opposite each other. On the one hand were the head of the Guild of Lemur, soybeans, as well as the guard, who supervised Soya until he was in the cage. Representatives of the trading company gathered on the opposite side. When the guard saw Soybean, he was even a little surprised, because they had recently parted. At the same time, Soya explained the guard that he has already become an adventure seeker today. The guard also doubted whether the head of the guild was managing everyone here. In response, the chairman assured that if an experienced veteran had gone instead, it would be much more difficult. Soya understood everything and agreed that such a decision was just. Soon Soybeans, the head of the guild and the representative of the Weld police, were already sitting in front of the head of the trade company, Night Owl Zava. She was a woman named Galzelt, the mother of the same guy who treated Soya boldly. She sincerely apologized to Soya for her son's actions, explaining that he was a real brawler and temporarily works with her. He greeted the woman, hiding his surprise about the fact that the meeting personally appeared to the meeting. At this point, the man from the police department decided to rush the conversation. He recalled Galza Li that her trading company was suspected of stealing property and wondered if she knew something about it. Galzalda confidently replied that she was not known about it. After that, the employee wondered if Galzalda heard about the explosion in his own warehouse, which happened yesterday. The cause of all this was soy. An explosive device stopped on him. On this note, Galzalda was a little discorded and replied that she had been deposited by soybeans for storage to another trading company. The woman assured that she had no idea that these things were stolen. She was then asked to name the name of this company. Halseld objected, explaining that she could not do it, as it would undermine confidence in her own firm. She assured that her trading company also suffered significant losses. This composition stored many valuables left by adventure seekers that were not properly appreciated. In addition, the employees of the company were injured as a result of the explosion, and the neighboring warehouses of other firms were also damaged. It has been stated that compensation for the spoiled goods of the company has been caught inconvenience for other firms, and treatment of warehouse employees will be 97.05 gold. Since such an amount was unbearable for one person, the responsibility for payment was taken by the Guild of Adventure. At that moment, the face of the head of the guild was ripping. This news did not like her. He will call the union and ask what he is going to do with such money. After all, this amount is equal to the annual budget of the guild itself. Soybeans calmly assured that everything is under control. In addition, all this happened before his official registration, so the guy can afford to pay any cost he will get off his hands. Then Sava turned to the Hall of Zelda. He stated that the destroyed things were stolen, but the old Gaul hides a real criminal, afraid to lose the trust of the company that relied on them. He insisted that Halsald would compensate him with the loss and return the found. Realizing that a fair agreement was possible only with the support of the higher forces, Halsald decided to turn to her god to reconcile the parties. After saying these words, the woman got from the feather of the goddess, rose, solemnly raised her up, and began a prayer. After saying these words, a beautiful bird appeared from nowhere. Graboius instantly turned to Main Zelda and asked what purpose she caused this creature. I also asked Grabius to try to negotiate with a stranger. Case Gravius decided not to delay and act immediately. First of all, she asked her to name her name and the name of her deity. Soybean recommended and said he was a follower of Miss Laniki. Then Gravius wondered if Mrs. Lanika was present here, to which Soya replied that his goddess was now immersed in a sweet sleep. He removed the glasses and stated that today, instead of the goddess, negotiations would be conducted by another person. As he said it, the soybean glasses of the soybean glasses shook, and a little hologram, similar to a girl, appeared before everyone. In fact, it was Makina. She introduced herself and explained that in this world it exists as a twin spirit. In fact, it was only a hologram of Makina, not a spirit. Sogas glanced at Galsald and noticed that the woman still thought she could take a fee. At this point, Galsald stretched a Gabasi sheet with a list of damaged items and a quick report. Looking at the sheet and seeing the amount of 97.05 gold, He decided that it was quite fair. However, Makina intervened here. She noted that the numbers are inaccurate. According to the latest changes in the market, the sum is 98 gold, 2 silver, and 6. They also anticipated such a development. Nevertheless, the combs managed to detect a drone comb, but soybeans have already collected all the information you need. At this point, the comb again reminded that the price is quite fair. He explained that those who dispose of money control people, and those who use their abilities always attract attention. In his opinion, this is not surprising or abnormal. Subsequently, Grabasti turned to the elder of the goal and wondered if it was suited to 98 gold, 2 silver, and 6 copper. Paulzold confirmed that the sum suits him. At this point, Saya handed Makini a list of her products. Makina carefully took the list. It included 3 optical sights for rifles, 20 Kalashnikov machines, and 8 units 911s. It was then that Makin interrupted Galzel, reporting that she had heard from her son about a recent assessment of the weapon, which Saya conducted at a local exchange station. On the other hand, he noted that these weapons were too small, and it is difficult for him to imagine something like that in his world. At the same time, it became known that 100 gold coins can be obtained for 1 copy of such weapons. And when it comes to a compact option, the price is doubled. Vakina thanked the soybeans for the warm words, and after she made the necessary calculations, determined the final cost. 36 gold. The soybean undertook to list coins, preparing for the purchase of ammunition. Meanwhile, Makina reported that the import of weapons and gunpowders made of dwarfs is strictly forbidden. Galsald also added that 6 months ago, during the production of gunpowder, there was an accident. Since then, the sale and distribution of gunpowder here is full. The woman explained that this is why it is impossible to call the exact price. At this point, the soybean began to get a gun out of his pocket. Suddenly a huge piece of meat appeared on the table. He thought for a long time. He asked everyone to cover his ears and then shot a piece of meat on the table. The shot stunned all those present. Messiner quickly guessed that it went beyond their understanding, so he hastened to explain. His weapon uses smokeless gunpowder. It can be compared to local black powder, but it is a completely different substance, so this weapon is not banned. Gravius denied this, believing that it was just another kind of powder. At the same time, Makina assured that they came into this world only to pass the dungeon. They have no other designs for soybean, especially, they are not going to ignite war or recruit enemies. Confessing the wisdom of soy, he did not seek to make money on trade. That is why the Grey did not insist on setting its own dust price. Kenna began his check. Here is the Mislaniki gold coins. They store a little magic. Once upon a time, these coins went in a country that no longer exists. Now every lost nail is valued in 1 such coin. Since no one still understands how magic works, this moment should be missed when calculating. Graboyus considered such an agreement unfair. But Makino, in turn, noted that they have 2,580 rounds of 7.62mm hearts and 300 asserts. At this moment the whole body trembled from the sunny hall. Ken continued his story. He argued that today the course of 1 gold monet mislanica is equal to 22 gold coins. Thus, 63,360 gold coins are obtained in the sum. Point turns to Gravel and asks if they can be interrupted. Boards clearly did not like the bird. She turned to Holsall with clarification whether she realized correctly. This woman insisted at the beginning of the hearing, and now she is trying to interrupt him. The Holsall confidently confirmed. That's right. The Gravis was not joke. She straightened her wings and shouted with a shout on Galsald. She angrily stated that she deprives Holsald of her divine care for the whole year. And in order to earn forgiveness, Holsald should start with the lowest, to trade vegetables. From such a strict requirement, all present are silent for surprise. In a few seconds she mastered herself and turned to Soybean and Makina, announcing that she would share with them. Gravius got 2 feathers and asked them to lift these feathers up and utter her name if they wanted to move on. After that, the bird said goodbye to her new friends from another's land and disappeared. After Gravius left, silence reigned in the office. Halseld, covered with anger, ordered the police to leave them alone. Istman left the office, and Kalsel turned to the Soya and asked if he had any questions. Soya confidently asked only one question. Who stopped containers? Pavlov's will did not give a direct answer at once. She assured that the containers were assigned to Alame's trade organization from Western Phoenix, and added that her reckless son became the driver of the young manager of the organization. His only concern was that she now had this burden. She was afraid that, having learned everything, Soy would throw everything to his or her. However, soybeans were not going to complete the conversation. Kalsald insisted. To raise such a huge amount of money, I would have to empty the entire state treasury. The woman claimed that even membership in the guild would not save Soy from the appearance of enemies from trade associations, and pointed to him. Kalsald noted that he was only an ordinary adventure seeker. Everything can end in the fact that the royal family will select all property from him. In this case, he will simply be expelled from the kingdom. Hercel demanded that Soy cease these cheap threats and behave more modestly than water, below the grass, if he does not like something in this agreement. These words have been angry with soybeans. It was just in rage. He threatened to throw all the gold coins into the sea. And what happens to a country that will lose most of its treasury? It will be completely cut from the world. And where then the capital will get the necessary goods? Having realized the situation, the Sawyer has resigned to the fact that he would probably just kill him. But he was not going to give up so easy. In the end, what will remain from the goal, from the royal family, from other influential organizations? Having expressed all the warnings and explanations, Soy appealed to the frightened Golsilda. She insisted on it to weigh everything well, and gave her an answer. She was already trembling with fear. Finally, gathering with the spirit, asked the soybean if he wanted to know something else. Soya asked the woman if she instructed the adventure seekers to attack the camp. Palsold shook her head. Then Soy wondered if she lifted the fishman to steal the containers. The woman quickly assured she did not ask anyone and only kept things. Finally, the Saya decided to complete this dispute. Finally, he reminded the woman that she and her son remain in debt. And if they try to escape, the Saya will not hesitate to take advantage of the pen that gave him Gravrai. Honestly, this whole situation was disappointed. Everything was solved by one shot. The following negotiations developed strangely, so I shot in a crystal ball. His face was as if he had just left the coma and remembered nothing. And the girl, meanwhile, turned to the mermaid. She dreamed of getting her feet to be near this man, but the artifact took her love in exchange for the opportunity to walk. So she returned a container with medical supplies. Thus ended this series of mysterious events, which was beyond the understanding of the Compton Union. In 6 days, in another world, Savia has put the entire weapon in the container. Machina was not sure whether it was the right solution. She believed that at least one weapon should be left with her, but the Savias firmly decided to get rid of everything. However, weapons could not control special skills. As Machina noted, this could lead to war. Soil left a weapon container to get it. The Get, in turn, promised that after that, he would inevitably drown a container with weapons at the bottom. Saying goodbye to Soil, he went to do the plan. He was already going to return to his usual business, when he suddenly felt his feet, and the whole body began to tremble. The Beveled instantly ran to his aid, and asked excitedly what had happened. Holding his head, Sio assured that he just relaxed sharply. At that moment, Machina noted that 6 days have passed since Saya was in another world. During this time, the guy almost did not sleep at all. Machina said it was dangerous for his health, because she could not do without sleep. She advised Saya to eat and finally relax. Listening to her words, Saya decided to prepare dinner on her own. Soybean and Sinica insisted that Saya finally rest and went to bed. When he was delayed, even after dinner, Miss Linica threatened him, forcing him to go to bed. Hiding in a blanket, he slept sweetly, plunging into a winter holiday. Suddenly, someone's hand touched his cheeks gently. The 7th day of stay in the new world. Soya went to the dungeon again. This time a real adventure was waiting for him. On the way, he met Atu, who immediately congratulated him on a good morning. The soybeans answered the girl reciprocity. Efta noted that she was very early now, but assured, before any journey, you should always have something important. And so, as the soy was still asleep, Machina suddenly woke him up, turning on the loud music to the full. At this point, the veterinarian gave the soybean equipment from the guild. The girl was convinced that there was everything necessary, but decided to see and look inside. She noticed several bottles and asked Steve what it was. She asked for soybean his hair or nail. The soybeans agreed and allowed the girl to cut one hair from his head. On the other hand, soybeans noted that it was not necessary to wear a regeneration tape, but was usually hung in a prominent place so that comrades could see. It was then that the soybeans realized that he was holding the same ribbon in his hands. Without hesitation of a second, he hung her on his neck. Meanwhile, Evet launched a book. She began to pronounce mysterious words. In the name of the lost if, following the wind, the name of Lemuria, the wing of the seagull, give this trip to your last miracle. This is achieved through life wisdom. Faith releases the hand of God, allowing you to enter the demon's arm. Faith changes the protection that envelops human life. Taylor's man. The words voiced by Eiffel were revised. After that, she struck soybean on her head. The girl immediately began to apologize to the boy, assuring that she did not want to hurt, especially so much. Soy himself remained somewhat stunned after such a blow. He would like Eiffel to restrain himself next time. The veterinarian asked the soy vigorously to shake the regenerative strip until the colors appear on it. Soybean carefully accomplished this task. The guy saw with his own eyes how the colors appeared on the strip. The veterinarian, intrigued by this result, carefully examined the regenerative strip. The girl could now confidently claim that everything was succeeded. When the girl asked Savia to look carefully at the strip, she explained, "Red means inner magical power, and blue, external. It is the inner magic that helps Soy to restore her own body. However, the possibilities of regeneration are limited by the reserve of this force. Thanks to her, the Savis can heal even a torn hand, leg, or restore the organs after serious injuries." At that moment, the Saya finally realized why his head did not hurt at all after a powerful blow to an experienced warrior. He also remembered 3 adventurers with the same incredible force. The veteran cautiously warned the Sava so that he did not rely on his ability to regenerate. After all, if he has cut off his head, it will be impossible to escape. Therefore, this ability does not protect Soy from poison or parasites. If he does not notice that the internal supply of magical power is exhausted, may be fatal injuries. Due to the external magical energy, soybeans are capable of using magic. In addition, one veterinarian wanted to check if soybean could become a magician. At this point, Soybe asked if it had a powerful ability to recover. The Yvette thought a little, remembered their training, and said that his regeneration speed is the same as the puppies. So, as a result, soybeans received the same rank as puppies. The command was carried out by a middle-aged man with a bandage. He headed the race of Hemmedum and was called Hyak. It was he who announced that for newcomers adventurers, start training under the code name 24-02. Who will become a soybean mentor? Another boy and 3 girls. And then Sawyer finally realized. The family of Gims. Ordinary people. Not special. That is why the boys were deliberately divided by racial. At that moment, a strong blow to the shoulder suddenly brought Sawyer out of thought. As it turned out, Hyak is Eve's father. So the girl insisted that the Soya listen to him. If he needed to the restroom, let him go right now. However, if the Soya feels the danger, he should run immediately. Listening to these guidelines from Ave, Soya thought for a moment. Like a real mother. At that moment, his father approached Eve, turned to his daughter, and, showing Soya, asked if he was the same foreigner. She confirmed that Soya was really a foreigner and asked her father to take care of the boy. The Soya was annoyed by the fact that Eve gave him a smile before everyone. Now all those present paid attention to him. Hake also felt dissatisfaction because of a new tension in the air. But he was pleased that the rest were feeling well. The first thing he said was that everything that happens next would be a real adventure for him. Pia Kudu called him his good friend and even gave his name. The detachment of adventure, led by Hyak, went to the dungeon. At some point, one of the girls of their company came to Soybean and asked what his relationship with his sister. She meant a veterinarian. Soybe asked not to invent her unnecessary, and Chenka punched this animal without any difficulty. She also managed to conclude a contract with Gladwin. Hearing this, a guy with blonde hair in the group was just stunned. It turned out that the Sham is a girl who was the first to come to Soybean. The girl in the hat said that the dungeons are often enslaved, despite the fact that they are not dangerous creatures. They are often confused with the animal, because the only difference between them is horns. She warned her companions to be alert. A meeting with adult Hans can turn into a disaster, because such a creature is able to break a person into pieces. It was said that young Hansa can be profitable to sell, so if the adventure seeker is confident enough, He can train Hansa, and then create from her the strongest warriors or even ladies of easy behavior. It was at this moment that Kayak listened to the boys' conversation and realized the girl in the hat meant his daughter, Havet. Therefore, he immediately stated that Havet belonged to King Lemuria. He had a lot of merit as an adventure seeker, so if the hat did not stop his mockery, Kayak promised to deal with her alone. The girl understood his seriousness and apologized to Kayak. Within minutes, the group reached the second floor of the dungeon. Although it is a dungeon, if everyone holds together, nothing threatening will happen. Before leaving the dungeon, everyone needs to swim in the source in order not to bring the disease to the city. The band finally reached the third floor, where the victorious monsters were still lying. This has created a new problem for them. He illuminated the darkness of the lantern and began to explore the fourth floor from this place, opening the true essence of the dungeon. After that, Kayak turned to Soy. Kayak handed over the mappa and announced that he was now under his leadership. The soybean task is to bring the team to the fifth floor, and the Kayak will wait for them below. Soy did not even have time to get off, so he immediately asked for explanations. Kayak was carried out by a gust of wind. Meanwhile, Soya decided to find a leader among his comrades, launched a map, and asked if someone wanted to take the leadership. Blondine approached him and asked him to give him a card. Soya handed the boy to the boy, relying on his determination. One of the boys took the map, looked closely at it, and confidently showed a direction in which, in his opinion, he should move on. But here the Soya stopped him and noted that the map in his hands was inverted upwards. Laughing, he apologized to the boys, explaining that he first seized the dungeon card. Hearing this, Soybean decided to take all responsibility. First of all, he asked the ISOL to download the card and make a detailed guide. The guy realized that there was no answer, although he could not understand the reason. At that moment, the danger suddenly caught up with their group. A giant, spooky bird, along with a large predatory animal, appeared behind. The guy with one strand of hair immediately noticed the monster and rushed to protect the owl. Without thinking, he rapidly attacked the bird and struck him. She joined the sword as well. She quickly grabbed her sword. The sword strongly swung the sword on the monster, but it was not enough. The powerful bird did not succumb. Two more girls were connected to the battle to help in the fight. The monster was both roasted and pierced. The soil watched this scene without understanding what was happening. The first to understand what creature was faced, it was she who was a monster called Chi. The girl noticed that on the faces of her companions there were funny expressions when Chi suddenly jumped in front of them. The bird was considerable in size, and the meat was enough. The hat short for long, and then Blondin asked if she was going to eat prey. She didn't even deny it. She assured that Chi meat is really delicious. It can be easily seasoning, and even eggs are added on top. In addition, as many as 30% of all products in the city comes from the dungeon. The blonde river confessed that he never wondered where the food he consumes came from. On this, the hat made the conclusion. Blondin, apparently, from a noble family. He could deny that his family did not belong to the higher circles and bragged to her. It was at this point that Soya turned to Shanks. It turned out that the guy was wondering how strong the monster Chi. Shianka was in no hurry to answer the questions of Salvia. Instead, wondered why he was this information. As it turned out, the Saya noticed that Shianka was moving as if she had the experience of battles with monsters, although they were new to all. Then Shianka explained that Chi usually hid, waiting for the prey, but if suddenly it takes a lot of disasters. He liked how Shianka was able to defeat Chi with one powerful blow. He was amazed at how well the Shunk and a knight were in harmony, although they did not work out this match in advance. At that moment, the Savoy wondered if the Shianka would succeed. After all, she trained with the knight. For some reason, this question made the Shion strain. Suddenly, a loud roar came nearby. Beginner adventurers shuddered at surprise. Such a sound was scared of them. Everyone was strenuously staring at the darkness, from where a creepy sound came from. In the dark, they saw only giant shining eyes. In a few seconds, the insurance man appeared in all its grandeur. A giant pig stood in front of them, from which saliva flowed profusely. Slowly but constantly, she was approaching a group of adventurers. Once face to face with such a monster, adventurers were confused and covered by fear. At that moment, an angry boar rushed forward. Without hesitation, he rapidly approached the stunned adventurers. Seeing this, Soya buzzed with fear. Having froze in place, he was confused and did not know how to proceed. Alan was in despair. She screamed with her zombies, ordered to flee from here. The Getar and her girlfriend were frozen in place, unable to take her eyes away from a pig that was constantly approaching. Suddenly, she grabbed the girls with her arms and pulled them behind. At this point, he also hastily pulled his legs away from an angry pig. Realizing the danger, the guy turned sharply to cover his back. It was then that he managed to repel. And it was at this moment that night revealed its characters. He chose the Boar path and ordered him to approach. The knight felt that her duty was to meet the enemy face to face. The Boar approached, and with only one stroke of the hoof threw away the knight sideways. The knight flew high in the air and was hardly gap nearby. One of the girls looked around to see what happened on the knight, but the soybean sharply ordered her to run further and in no case rotate. They did not know what the monster attacked them. How to eat to grow to this size. At that moment, Soybo shouted and showed her to turn. However, the monster was already nearby, so Soy was throwing a short order, to rush forward and run on without stopping. In the end, they paid a horn with a girl with short hair. She was very frightened and carefully asked for Soybean what he conceived. Soya explained that they need to break away from others in order to work his plan. At that moment, the girl turned sharply. Her hand clenched the spear. She began to whisper strange words. The king, the spirit of the tree, Yuzakal, God's harvest Gestalfo. I, Beltrich with Azuldo, I ask. I have a miracle in front of me. Pubig, stop it. With the last words, she dropped the seeds on the ground, and at the same moment from them, the branches of the turnopunner exploded. The turnober wrapped the pig, clasping the monster and not let him move. So Bell kept the pressure of the monster for a while. Soybeans and the girl were able to escape. First of all, the soybird dropped the cloak and asked Bell to put a spear on the grass. They carefully lowered the weapon, and then Soy asked the girl to take him at the end. He thought that their plan could not work. Therefore, Soybeans wanted Bell in the event of danger, while the monster would be distracted by him. But Bell believed that it was useless. If the boar was flying, then they would reprimand them. At this point, the monster appeared again from the corner. The boar rushed at them with all his power, so I ordered Bell to prepare. Now they will go to actions. The boar has already come close, so Bell and Soybeans, combining the forces, stabbed the spear directly into the monster's mouth. This significantly stopped his pressure. The monster did not seem. The pig fiercely attacked the boys again and again. Her fangs were almost touched the soybean hands, and he could not understand why the animal had not yet breathed. The young man grabbed his dagger, getting ready to strike Kabanov. The boar skin was too thick, the blade could not break it, and I was confused, not knowing what to do next. At this point, the beast was almost attacked by Bella. Then the guy, without hesitation, closed the girl with his body, resigned to defeat. Suddenly the pig sharply retreated back and shrunted. The pig deliberately fell to the ground. Bell and Soy could not understand anything. Suddenly, Belshanka enclosed the sword just into a pig, pressing her to the ground. On the moist soil, the blade of the chanterre easily pierced the thick skin of the animal. The girls immediately rushed to each other. They were excited. They could not contain a joyful noise. It was not yet believed that everyone remained alive. She turned to Soybean and sincerely thanked him for the salvation. In response, Soybeans acknowledged that the bell was only thanks to the bell's search, although he noted that he had a spare plan for a similar case. At this point, there was a Hay. He praised the boys for a beautifully done work, because even experienced adventure seekers cannot handle such a carcass. On the shoulder of Hayok nose, the unconscious knight. He said that he heard some noise from above and, suspecting that something serious had happened, hurried to help. He assured that he was genuinely admired by the courage of the boys, and therefore would go to them to the very end, at least that would be waiting for the bottom. Hearing this, Soa was stunned, and did not even believe what he heard. Hayek wanted to say something else to the newcomer, but first decided to return with the boys through the portal and freshen up with hot water. Finally, Kayak confessed that the boys made a good impression on him. After a while, newcomers, including Soybeans, sat behind a bar. Taking a glass in his hands, Soya thanked all the guys for their first joint outing in the dungeon. He proposed to continue to fight side by side and go together into new adventures. The rats were friendly Soybeans when he decided to drink to the bottom in honor of such a wonderful toast. The boys finally sat down, because after a busy working day, everyone was tired. In the end, it turned out that Knight did not honor alcohol at all. Instead, Shianka was just crazy from me. The first walk of House Soya ended. For this moment, he reached the 5th floor, so there are another 51 floors in front of him. In the morning, Macken woke up cheerful and greeted the guy on a good morning, adding about the current situation. It was 6th. There was clear weather outside. The temperature, 23 degrees Celsius. Mahina also wished successful work today. Some time has passed, and Soya was in this world. He has already gone to the dungeon, but after a clash with the monster, it became quite obvious. Local places are extremely dangerous. Now soybeans are in hopelessness. His only deadly weapon is the Taysak, but even he failed to cope with the pig. The guy goes down again to the dungeon with the same team. His helplessness will only add problems to all, and therefore he needs to find a new weapon to replace the firearms. To be honest, Soy has a rather modest physical strength, even by the standards of a regular adventure seeker. He even wondered, would he be a problem for him to cut something with one sword with a sword? It is even harder to raise the sword than a machine gun, and it does not have time for training. This means that soybeans have a very limited choice of weapons. He came to meet again with his eldest son of Goal. Seeing Soybean, that timid guy was almost frightened to death. He shouted loudly in one direction, the other, attracting the attention of all passers-by. People looked around, not understanding what was happening. Soybean tried to explain that he just came to look at the weapon, but the man did not stop his noise. After noticing his cowardice, Soybean decided to scare a man a little and stated that he would serve to traders from Alamy. Hearing this, the frightened seller immediately calmed down. Soya explained his behavior, confessing that he simply did not resist. He then stated that he had come to inspect the crossbows. The merchant noted that the crossbows are now very popular with adventurers, but Soybean did not pay any attention. He always went to a separate room, the walls of which were indigenous to the various crossbows. For a while, Sawa tried to charge the crossbow, but he never succeeded. The guy did not understand what the reason, and even suggested that the weapon was knocked down. However, the merchant, who also tried to charge the crossbow, convinced him that it is simply impossible. The product is in full service. He looked at the shopkeeper with his dissatisfaction, making it possible to make a blonde that was already annoyed. In response, he called someone by name. At the same moment, a chunky man appeared behind his back. Surprisingly, UFF, despite its giant sizes, was surprisingly calm. The merchant asked him to charge the crossbow. Without unnecessary words, took the weapon and easily pulled the bowstring. Seeing this, the Soya frozen in surprise. At this point, the Soya was asked if he enjoys adventures. Soya confidently replied that he was really an adventure seeker. But here the blonde intervened in the conversation and negatively noticed, they say, the Soya is nothing more than a regular bee. Ufuf advised the Soya to choose a bow at such a price, emphasizing that although these weapons are not the most powerful in the dungeon, it still has its advantages. However, those adventurers who underestimate the bow quickly create problems for others. Ufuf advised the Soya to stay on the bow if he is able to stay away from the danger. Elven bows are wonderful, but in the hands of the colonies cannot stand. Instead, cheetahs treat them carefully and can handle them. At this point, Soybe asked Daff whether he was an adventurer. As it turned out, Daff was really an adventure seeker, but he has now guarded the shopkeeper. And then Soya realized where UFF knows all this. So he decided to listen to Ufa's advice and chose a bow that he recommended. He also asked to help with the choice of arrows. Uf explained that light arrows would not work here. It is much easier to find. Therefore, he advised Sawyer to take the arrows of Kia. Sawyer listened to this advice and chose them. Meanwhile, Blondin watched the boys with surprise, because UFF did not even work in this shop. The soybean pushed Blondin to the side to count the shopping away. Arrows, tips, wood, 20 each. And soybean noticed that he would need the chips. The blonde calmly replied that the bogs were already included. He returned to Ufa, thinking. He wanted to ask a giant question, so he put a coin in his hand. Soyi wanted to find out if UV knew someone who could quickly teach him to shoot. UV tightened the coin in his hand. He replied that he knew the true master of this case. After all purchases, the soybean went to him. Nasina suggested his help, but Soy assured that he would handle herself. He thought at heart, in the world there are enough adventure seekers, it is necessary. Suddenly, the soybean heard the cries. Hey, Mr. Bool, you fell asleep again near the laundry. All your clothes in the wool are not enough. Enough! The voice belonged to the girl, and Soybean spontaneously cast his gaze in her direction. Suddenly, As if from nowhere, a huge wolf with a thick wool grew in front of him. He looked at this talking beast and got sick. There were no words. He only felt a completely different energy from this creature, not at all that UFS. In addition, the wolf impressed its size. At the same moment, the girl who was so loudly outraged offered Buffalo if she wanted to settle on the floor. It was then that Soy asked her if Buffalo was something like God. Hearing this, Buffalo looked carefully at Soybeans. He turned to Soybean and wondered if he had heard something about the purity of Buffalo. The hero of the North, Soy, stood, trembling with fear, finding words for answer. Then Buffalo noticed that obviously a stranger in these parts. The wolf asked the guy where he came from. Soybeans felt only the easting smell coming from Buffalo. At the same moment, the 10th soybean was saved by a girl who also appeared from the air. A girl with tailed ears on her head held a large bag. She was a beast, and asked Buffalo if she intended to pay the bill at all. Such behavior annoyed Buffalo, because it was this girl who had previously selected him all the equipment. In response, the girl pushed the bag and loudly stated that it was only a junk that was not even worth a copper coin. She laughed loudly and stated that human equipment was not standing with the fact that they produce in Rokans. These merchants do not even imagine the true value of their goods. It was then that Soya wondered in Buffalo if he was an adventure seeker. Buffalo confirmed, yes, he is really an adventure. He briefly replied that he was a hunter for vampires from the fallen city plot of the first continent Naomi. His name is Buffalo Rocking. The girl with her ears told Soybeans that Buffalo was somehow perceived as a monster and attacked him. He waved his hand and missed the attacker. He was only slightly injured and instantly faint. After that, Buffalo received reprimand from the head of the guild. Whenever Buffalo remembered the expression of the head of the guild at that moment, he wanted to laugh through tears. Soybeans, looking at Buffalo, suddenly realized that he sees his goddess Miss Lana in him. In the end, Buffalo is a real hero who, despite constant trials and deadly dangers, does not lose courage and always holds on with dignity. Soybeans are finally conscious. He demonstrated a charming shiny coin of Acoin and asked them to hold them with their ears, because they knew these places well. Seeing such a seductive coin, Buffalo and the girl opened their mouths in surprise. Meanwhile, Soybeans had already wandered an empty, unfamiliar street. From time to time, the beasts, the elves, ran past him. On the sidewalks were visible and homeless people, huddled in the open. So Soya wandered these abandoned streets until she finally found what she was looking for. These were the same two elves that once saved his life. They slept calmly sitting on the deck. He managed to say only 2 words. But as soon as he spoke, one of the elves instantly woke up, already holding a ready, made bow and directed in his direction. She ordered the boy and not to move, otherwise he was guaranteed death. At that moment, the second Elfian woke up. She appealed to her sister, Ellie, to stop it. At first, the guy finally exhaled with relief. The young man decided to thank the elves for salvation and realized that without their help, he would probably die. Wanting to thank, Sava stretched them a small bag with a gift, but the eldest of the sisters assured that it was superfluous. She could not leave a person with such injuries, the Elfian said. The girl emphasized that she cured the Sava only from good intentions and sincere sympathy. Soybeans failed to persuade both girls. He introduced himself to Elfam, adding that he was a traveler who recently returned from abroad. The girls also decided to introduce themselves. The older name is Luna Laura Halls. She is also an experienced adventurer. Her younger sister is called Alice. Luna asked Elle to say hello to Soya, but Ella thought that Soy was a chemist, so she didn't want to do it. Then Luna threatened her sister, angry because of her behavior. Understanding everything, Ella no longer denied. Lara Halls proudly went forward to confidently introduce Soybeans. At the same time, she warned him. If he dare to turn to her in his name, he will immediately get an arrow between his eyes. Soybean decided not to delay and immediately go to the business of his visit. Soybean explained that she was looking for a mentor from a shooter. He heard that the elves were the real craftsmen of this case, so he came to ask them to take him in the students. Of course, the guy was ready to pay generously for training. Without hesitation for a moment, she strongly stated that under no circumstances the chemist would teach. She also paid attention to the elfic soybean. The girl thought that the soybeans could break him from some dead or just steal him. At this point, Lorene strictly pacified her sister. The disputes did not subside. She insisted, Whom soybeans may be, first of all, it is a chemist. Suddenly, eyes began to stick together. In a moment the girl fainted. Even before Elle fell to the ground, Sogia picked it up in his arms, saving from falling. Laura Luna immediately rushed to her sister, but Ella was already unconscious. Without hesitation for a moment, the guy carefully put Elle on the ground as she began to cough. He quickly turned her side to the side so that she did not choke. He immediately reassured Laura Luna, explaining that everything was under control and had experience in such situations. The guy asked Laura to trust him. Soya began to find out why the girl could faint. He immediately noticed that he could not hear alcohol from her, so it could not be a matter of hangover. Then the guy suggested that Laura may have become ill. He took out a bottle of water and carefully drank Elle. He wanted to ask Laura Luna about the disease, but did not even have time to open his mouth as the girl assured him that it was not a disease at all. Laura Luna explained that an unfortunate confusion happened, and after all, Elle was simply sent first. This was paid for a moment and then completed her story. It turned out that Elle was injured. It happened suddenly and simple, without unnecessary words. And at the same moment, Soybeans understood everything. Kelly was held in her hands, and Soya suggested that Laura Luna go to her camp, which was a little further from here. She assured that this place is much safer and better than aimlessly wandering the streets. He realized that Laura Luna could not trust him, so he suggested that she pick up everything he had and escape. However, Laura Luna refused. She believed that it was not enough to pay for her sister. In this situation, the Soya asked Laura Luna to entrust him with Ella's life. He only wanted Laura Luna to determine what the price of her trust would be. The young man was silent, and Sawa already wanted to turn to her. But he was stopped by one trifle. The guy could not remember how the name of the older was pronounced. Embraced by trembling, Soy no longer understood how to proceed, but stubbornly did not give up. Laura Luna looked at the soybean sincerely and frankly. She allowed the boy to turn to her simple, Lana. Soybeans felt relieved and finally calmed down a little. After a while, Soybeans, along with Ella and Lana, reached his camp. He asked Lana to wait a little while he puts a tent. At this point, Makina greeted Soya and asked him to borrow Poncho. Makina intended to check that there were no traces or vomiting. Soya agreed to help with everything that Makina would ask, and in a few minutes the tent was ready. He carefully brought Elle to the tent and put it on the mattress. The girl was still unconscious. Isola approached Soybean, nicknamed the Thermos. He greeted and advised Soybeans to take antibiotics in advance for prevention. It is worth noting that these features were replaced in this small flask when tuning and creating a dungeon. Thus, he became autonomous, so he drank an antibiotic, listening to the advice of Isol. Concerning autonomy. Under the established rules of work, it is forbidden to move independently. Solo insisted that he acted autonomously. Just Soy accidentally disturbed his balance, causing the robot. Makina confirmed. I saw that he said it. So Soy decided to postpone this issue for later. Soya asked Makina to ask, how is the recovery of a program called Doctor? Makina replied that only 15% of work has been done currently. Full recovery will take about 3 months. By that time, soybeans should not harm the internal organs. Then he wondered if there was only 15% chance of surgery. Makina explained that this is almost impossible. The results of the tests indicate that the probability of success is too low. He decided to postpone the case and had to dine at first, because Lana was already waiting for him. She, enjoying the snowy kebabs, said she went to the city in the morning. After a while, Savia and Lana had lunch together. Trying the soybean dish, Lana was delighted. She liked the taste. She did not know what this dish was called, but she was sure that she was very tasty. The Saya explained that it was a soup. Fish and vegetables were added to the miso, and then they cooked together. Lana, however, did not understand what a soup was and what a miso is, so she looked at the Savyu with surprise, waiting for explanations. At that moment, the Saya suddenly felt embarrassment. It would be much easier for him if Lana was interested in some exquisite dish. The guy tried to explain to the girl what a miso is. It was then that Ellen heard. She felt the sharp smell of fish. It turned out that the girl had already woke up and even got out of bed. Seeing Elle, Soy asked if she got better. He suggested that the girl eat something, stretching her a plate with a soup from an eared fish. The guy assured that it was just a soup, but Ella replied that soy sow with stinking fish did not want. She insisted she will decide what and where to eat. He still had to ask Eliu to be more polite. However, Soya assured that everything is fine. He only showed Ely that his back is a container with food, and she can choose what he wants. Ella decided to try Dasha Cancer noodles. Ella began to taste the dish. Laga was surprised to ask if she really chose Dasha Cancer. However, Ella confidently assured that she wanted to taste this noodle. At this point, Miss Lanika came to the room. She returned to the soybean and asked who the guests were. Soybean replied that he invited the girls to help him with training in archery. Hearing this, Miss Lanika immediately realized that she had unusual girls, and someone is quite special. In the end, Miss Lanika herself had the power of a dark flame. Monica explained to the guests that she considers her relatives through a special connection. The cat also greeted the girls, calling them and singing, "Elven girls." Lana introduced herself and introduced everyone to her younger sister, who looked in the distance silently, as if she could burst the place where her attention was paid. Soybean told the elves that this plot of land was temporarily used to use one fisherman. It is because of this that they can be alone in nature and forget about the city fuss. Lana thanked the soybeans for this opportunity. At that moment, Miss Lannick suggested that he go with her and talk about McKinn. Going, Saya said Ellie that she could already eat a plaque. The guy also warned Ella so that she does not burn. Ella began to eat but still baked. Despite that, she liked the dish. Miss Lenica, who went far enough from the camp this time, began a conversation with the words that there is a concept such as endurance. Their family became famous for having extramarital children and mixed blood with representatives of other races. For this, the Lorland clan was called a tainted family. By the way, Misanka warned Soya to be careful, because he could not cope with women elves. At this point, Isola, which Soya was holding on his palm, reported that the collection of information was completed. It turned out that the people of El were in a state of war with Lemuria. The cause of the conflict was land trade. During the negotiations, when the eldest son of King Lemuria went to negotiate, he was killed. Lala warned Sawi not to be deceived by the appearance of the elves. In his opinion, this people was extremely dangerous. He advised never to lose vigilance with them. However, Sawa quickly broke him in half a word. Lala was suddenly silent because he was called. Sawa suggested that the boy teaches archery. Then she asked a fellow to say hello. Ella, with a dissatisfied look, assured that dashi dish was delicious. In addition, Sawa helped her. Sawa realized that it was a workout fee and sincerely thanked Elle. Turning, Ella headed back to the tent. She reported that she was going to tell her sister about the intention to pick up Sawa. Ella also asked Sawa to prepare, because they will start. When Sawa was going to flee, the Isola shouted in his name. Sawa replied that he had heard Isola. He assured that all communication with the elves was only part of the workout. Miss Alanik also had nothing against his training. She only wanted the guy to decide how to act. Miss Laniko asked Soyu not to forget her dream. The cat confidently stated that it is the most expensive soybean treasure, and Miss Laniko will always remain terrible than any elves. Soy training began. Ella decided to teach it the basics of the simplest style of hunters, because they had little time. In the beginning, the girl asked if the soybean knew how the hunter style was different from the style of the soldier. The guy honestly acknowledged that he had no idea about it. At that moment, she explained that when the bow holds straight and the arrow fits on the right side, it is a military style. Having said this, the girl released the bowstring, and the arrow accurately hit the center of the target. She took another arrow and explained the soybeans that when keeping a bow diagonally or horizontally and put the arrow on the left is already a style of hunters. The arrow broke again from the bowstring and hit the center of the shield. After that, the girl asked if the soybeans understood everything. The guy replied uncertainly as he realized, in the style of arrow soldiers, you can prepare faster for a shot, but it is more difficult to aim. And in hunting style, on the contrary. Such an answer was quite logical, so Ella decided that soybeans were not so hopeless, because the essence he caught correctly. Just in case, Ella ordered the soybeans to stand in a battle stand, face to the target. He had to keep the bow horizontally to the trunk, stretching his hand forward. The arrow had to lie between the index, middle, and ring fingers, only these three. It was claimed that the arrow should turn into a stone in a shot. At this time, soybeans had already begun to seem from fatigue. Ellie gave permission to shoot. The soybean released the arrow, and she accurately hit the center of the target. Seeing this, the guy did not hide his admiration. Just the perfect shot. The teacher argued that if someone is hopeless from the beginning, he would remain forever. However, LR understood. It's not about soya. Her result was brilliant, and she clearly denied these words. On the first day, Ella gave the task. Soya had to release 10 arrows in 30 seconds. As soon as the guy copes, he should call L. She meanwhile decided to sleep a little. The Soya agreed without hesitation and immediately took up the case. He did this without much effort, so every blow was definitely achieved. Suddenly, he was interrupted by the Isola. Soybo immediately wondered whether the Isola wanted to continue the conversation. It turned out that it was Isola and was thought. The first thing Lee asked was why Soya did not warn him of his intention to use the bow. In response, Soy asked if he was really able to treat him. He assured that he has a lot of useful information in his database. He further wondered if the database was damaged. I, Solar, replied that I recently completed its decryption. I sincerely wanted Soybeans to trust me, because together with Makina, we only tried to help. I asked the Soybean to contact me if any issues related to military affairs have arisen. The Soybean did not argue. After that, she decided to report the course of repair work. The master's program was loaded by 20%, the doctor by 15%, and cook by 27%. Isola wondered which of the soy programs wanted to prioritize. Soybean chose a cook. Isola wondered whether Soybeans really doubted her own dish by her own dish. Soya confessed that he was uncertain. He quickly consumes stocks and almost does not know the recipes. Instead, Isola assured that soybeans are in vain. He wasted too many cook resources. After all, if you need calories, ingredients are enough. Soybeans considered it a matter of paramount importance, so he was convinced that the cook would prioritize. Islaris's answer was unexpected. She turned to Isla with rather strange words, calling Soy pathetic. Hearing this, Soybeans so lost that he stopped working for a moment and looked carefully at Isol. At this point, Makina appeared to replace Isol. She reported that Isola had been temporarily disconnected and asked for her recent emotional outbreak. The analysis of the vomiting masses on the poncho, as it turned out, has already ended. There were no signs of infection and vomiting. The results of the blood test exceeded the norm. Soye then asked if this means that the ball still remains in the body of his soul. Mahina confirmed that he was right. It has been found that Ella's life would be at risk if the ball is not removed immediately. However, if Elle is still cured, Lana could invite Soya to join the team. In view of this, Soya decided to use the program of non-reinstated. The Soya sought to find out if foreign treatment would be lost on the Elfian. Of course, he later apologized, but it is difficult to endure helpless people. Makina considered this decision quite reasonable, and Soya himself was the same thought. Meanwhile, the arrows of the Union were hit one by one. The Union was aware that even after such a cold-blooded solution, it is not necessary to turn a blind eye to possible problems. After all, this worthless artificial intelligence is not even able to predict the events of the next day. The Union should be more careful about how to dispose of limited resources. He knew well. People only help those who can afford it, and he himself to seek help, and was not going. He was in this world to save his sister. Now he should not hammer his head with unnecessary thoughts. Soya only sought to free his mind and completely focus on shooting. Just shoot, and nothing more. The soybean woke up and saw a rabbit's muzzle just in front of him. Sleeping his eyes, the guy got up and realized that he had just groaned just during the workout. Soybo looked at the winged rabbit, sitting on his chest. The guy was lightly scratching his neck, thinking about not tame this amazing beast. After all, the rabbit really looked very kind. Not long, Soy decided to give him a name. Because he was so white, the guy chose the name of the snow. Taking a snowball, Soy decided to return to the camp. The soybean did not have time to blink as a white lump hit an arrow in a white fluffy lump. The rabbit died instantly. Soybeans frozen from shock, not believing in his own eyes. Everything happened too fast. Realizing everything, Soybeanly restrained the cry of horror. She triumphantly celebrated Ela triumphant. She got food, killing Snowfly. A little time has passed. The grill was apathetically browned with Snowfly. When the dish was ready, Soy asked Elle to wake up Long. It became known that Lana was invited to join the group. The girl suggested that Lana went to write a statement to the guild, but even so, Ella today was not going to descend to the dungeon. Ella quickly realized that this can be a problem. There is no refrigerator, and the barbecue will simply ruin before the fall. Soybo very much wanted Lana to taste the snow barbecue, so Ella advised Soybeans to go to meet Lana, and when she returns, they will continue their studies together. Soybo asked Elle if she would support him, but she grabbed her leg, in the place where she was injured by a bullet, and quietly confessed that she was feeling bad. The Soybeans understood everything without words, and went alone. When they left, Ella asked Makana to give her a little cancer. Makana was surprised. The girl just ate kebab and again hungry. In addition, according to Makina, Dasha cancer was far from the most delicious food. Despite the dissatisfaction with King and Ella, Makina still apologized and allowed the girl to eat everything she pleased. Soybeans were already approaching the dungeon. Soybean managed to find Lana, which was quite surprised to see the boy. Soya explained that Ella told him about Lana. She went to register in the group. Then Lana understood. It was Ella who asked Soon to find and pick her up. At this point, Soya noticed a few guys who looked at them with them. The guy decided that at that moment, Soy only thought that Lana should definitely prepare bento for such an event. Lana felt the need to apologize to the Soybean. She hastily left the camp without warning. The girl explained that she did not want to wake him, because he was training all night. The guy felt that he should also apologize to Lana for not brewing her breakfast, and already wanted to ask what dish she liked the most. At that moment, Lana thought so much that she trembled. Then the Union suggested that she choose a place for the meal. Meanwhile, Lana and the Union have already settled in the institution that Lana herself elected. Having tried the dish, the Union honestly noted that the food is not too tasty here. He did not want to seem unhappy, so he immediately warned it. Anna in turn acknowledged that soup prepared by Soya was surprisingly delicious. It has prompted the girl to think that Soybeans, apparently, a chef. However, the Soybean himself denied it. Then Lana suggested that he lives where only the best dishes were served. The girl confessed that she would be envied a little because of it. So I wondered what dishes were usually prepared by elves, Lana said thoughtfully. Thinking a little, the girl replied that the elves usually serve fruit, nuts, and a variety of herbs on the plate. They also like to combine fermented alcohol-based drinks, and it is surprisingly delicious. From these words, Savia concluded that elves prefer natural food. This is really good for health, although the taste, in her opinion, could be better. I noticed that Likes loves very salty food. It seemed strange to me, because such a passion is not peculiar to the dishes of the Elfie cuisine. On the other hand, Soya learned that Ella's teacher was a feast, and it seems that it had a significant impact on the girl. Therefore, Soya concluded that the turmoil in food does not correspond to the elves' traditions. Lana asks Soya if there is at least a chance to recover Ella. Soya is only silent in response. At this point, the musician rapped his song in the store. Long ago, where the eastern borders of our land were a charming country. In its depths, the ruins of an unknown city were dozing peacefully, over which a gloomy curse was gravitated. In that, suddenly, a genius, a hunter from the elves' forests, suddenly appeared. The patron saint of fogs and a prominent hunter, he entered the fight against the spider. His body enveloped a dense curtain of the fog, in which thousands of spider descendants were killed, dissolving in the darkness. Hundreds of arrows have lightly punched the spider's eyes. The battlefield has already been cleaned, and only the breathless body of the dragon eaters remained on the ground. The name of the hero whose heart rate saved the continent from death will sound in legends for a long time. An unknown and unwanted hunter from the large forest has won the hearts of people. One day evil will wake up again, and Lola will rebel from the dead. The mysterious hero, hidden in the fog, will overcome him again. Soy asked Lana if there was a Hull's share in her full name. The girl answered in the affirmative. At this time, a stranger was rapidly approaching their table. The stranger in armor, rapidly approaching Lana and Soya, suddenly overtook their table. The food flew on the floor, and the daring stranger in the armor turned to Lana, asking if it was set up to continue the conversation. He mocked and called Gaul descendants the fools for getting involved in the war with people and playing shamefully. In addition, the young man disrespectfully mentioned some princess who was not able to think during the war. As it turned out, the princess, which the foreigner disdainfully remembered, was called Lana. She sat, leaning her head, as if she knew what the young man would talk about. Meanwhile, an unknown guest continued to put on the charges. They say, "Shibre." His gaze turns to Soybean. The girl strongly states that interruption of lunch is the top of uneducated. The stranger called Soul and asked who he was. But Soybean mentally noted that it would have to ask this question himself. Soybean was completely embarrassed. He could not believe that he should not be recognized. In fact, the guy did not really know this stranger. So he asked him with irony, "If you are so important, why didn't you write your name just on your forehead?" These words cheered a girl who came with a bold man. The stranger decided to introduce himself, and as it turned out, the prince of the kingdom of Lemuria, George Senior Lemuria, stood in front of Soya. However, this did not make Sunis at all. Soybe asked George if it was accepted in Lemuria that the principals would be thrown away with food and interfere with a beautiful and influential lady to enjoy the meal. As soon as she said, she authored the prince with a closer one. In response, he called Soybean and reached for the sword. The Soybean did not grab the back. His hand also reached for weapons. At this point, Lana intervened. She ordered the Soybeans to go outside, promising to set up the situation alone. However, Soybeans were not going to just leave everything as it is. She insisted on her own. She wanted Soya to go. After all, these were problems of the royal family, not someone's senseless adventure or a small quarrel. And indeed, Soybean left the store. Soon, Makina approached him. She reported that the reconnaissance drones have already penetrated the dining room, and now Soybeans will be able to see images from their cameras. However, Soy himself did not even imagine what to do with this information, and Turn only wanted to give Soybeans one advice. He assured that in this world, Soybeans should decide how to act. The Soybean agreed with the Makana and asked to show the image. Seeing what was happening in the store, he became angry. Lana was with Apollo at this time. The prince was her companion. The actions of Soybeans, its rudeness, stunned both of them. He not only apologized, but also fell to George on his knees. On the other hand, he confessed to her that the elves had killed his older brother, so now he remained the only prince. George hoped that Lana would no longer invent such excuses. Lana's answer was only another apology. She lowered her head and quietly said, "Sorry." Meanwhile, Jorg pointed to his dirty shoes and ordered him to be cleaned. Lana agreed in silence and already pulled out a brush, but the prince demanded that she clean the boot in her own language. In his opinion, foolish elves should not follow people's habits. Even such humiliation was agreed without hesitation. Lana crawled into George and was already ready to lick his shoes. Suddenly, Soya ordered Makini to destroy all the drones in the room. She immediately obeyed the order. All the drones under the ceiling exploded at the same time. Jorg, distracted, looked up. But he had no idea that in a moment he would hit his foot just in the face. The blow was so powerful that shoes flew a few meters. The coordinates immediately rushed to him, and the confused Lana turned his gaze to Soya, who had already recovered after falling. It was a secret technique that he inherited from his sister, Yuki Kei's secret skill. He stayed on the floor for a long time. He stood quickly, removed his bow with arrows. Lana asked at this point whether he was aware of what he was doing at all. But Soy understood what he was going on. In addition, he laid even a knife on the table. He thought he would fight a regular traveler now. Meanwhile, the subordinates raised the prince from the ground. George rose to his feet and ordered his subordinate, Rachel, cut soybeans. Rachel wanted to deny the prince, but for the second time, he persistently gave her the same assignment, to cut soybeans. She then asked if the royal family always interceded for women while referring directly to Jorga. Soy was wondering if the prince really cut off all the courage. From these words, Jorg was angry, so that he already wanted to grasp the sword and rush into the attack. At that moment, the prince himself stopped his subordinate, Rachel. She denied that laughing at the long-haired is one thing, but if a member of the royal family sends his sword to another adventure seeker, the glory of the king will suffer serious harm. Then asked Jorga whether he is going only to chat. Will he already dare to go to business? On this, Jorg confidently lowered the sword and strongly stated that it would simply make Soy silence. The prince was convinced that he would be able to overcome such a rival as Soybean, even a naked. The boys prepared for a duel on their fists. It understands it perfectly. In an honest duel on the fists, the adventure seeker is much more likely to win. The guy was well. Seeing the condition of Soybean, the alien realized that her ward is still too weak. Ella only twisted. All this seemed nonsense to her. Only Lana was sincerely worried about Soya. She asked Miss Lanik and Ella if they were not going to help. He forgot about self-defense. It is too weak in this world. If you could somehow cope with an ordinary man, then before the adventure seeker is generally powerless. If the old man had not intervened, there would be nothing left of the soybean. Suddenly, Lana was falling. She asked Ella to borrow her bracelet. After all, he could accelerate the restoration of soybeans. Such an unexpected request was so surprised by Elle that she could not even say a word. It was impossible to use the owner as a bracelet and even give the Elven shrine together with the hymn. Lana ordered Ellie to silence and give her a bracelet. Not having a choice, Ella removed the decoration and handed it to the fallow deer. Lana put on a bracelet on the soybean hand and began to say the spell. O powerful Azeus, pass on my message to the late god of streams. Winds to this person, let them circle and dance around him. Give him a blessing, and let me disperse evil with this power. Harmonic, the goddess of harmony, fill this man with his divine energy. At that moment, a striking change occurred from the soybean. The swelling disappeared from his face. Only a few seconds passed as the guy opened his eyes, and Makina noticed 80% of soybean wounds were already delayed. However, Lana, who saw this, has warned, the next stage of treatment will be much more painful. Lana laid her hand on the brow of Soy and began to say, the great fire that curbs this world with its light, heat, and pain, healed this man. Suddenly, the Soy eyes opened wide, and a pair came from the pine palm. Soybo shouted in the whole voice. Lana asked him to suffer a little, but Soy was convinced that she was dying. Lana felt heavy heat, and soybeans were really burning. In a moment, everything ended. Now soybeans have only 5% of wounds. The abyss was struck, so he did not resist, and called Lana treatment with a real miracle. Lana rejoiced when he heard such words. When the soybean came to consciousness, he also thanked his rescue. She wanted to explain why she did this way, but did not find the right words. Lana tried to say that the events of this day opened something new about soybeans. However, this time she was missing words to express her feelings. At this point, Miss Lanik went to the tent and asked Makina how the treatment was undergoing. Makina replied that soybeans remained only light bruises that would disappear in 3 days. At this point, Soybe asked in the fallow deer whether it belongs to the family of this boy. Lana confirmed that she was a member of his family. At that time, Soya asked why a representative of the royal family decided to do an adventure life. After the defeat of the Elf Kingdom in the war, their father gave the daughters to King Lemuria as hostages. It was not surprised by anyone. Could he leave himself an ugly daughter who burned the forest? All the nobles supported Lana's father. The Lord of Lemuria was surprisingly good. Lana was preparing for prison or worse. Such a monster like she could have been forced to spend the night in a pig fence and tolerate humiliation, as if hostage. Instead, Lani and Ellie were allowed to beak. Anna assured that she would no longer allow such and next time she would handle herself. However, Savius asked Lana not to exaggerate. He assured that the next time he would be able to do better. Then Lana wondered in Savi whether he was aware that she was angry with him. She firmly stated that the next time she would surely handle herself. However, the Sawya could not throw a picture out of her head. Her mouth was very close to George's shoes when he looked. He thought that no real man would allow such a beautiful woman to behave so. These words were quite embarrassed by Lana. She strictly ordered the Soya to stop joke. After all, Soya was not aware of the standards of elven beauty, but Soya sincerely wanted Lana to believe in herself and became more confident. He emphasized again that she was really very sweet and beautiful. These words did not embarrass Lana. Feeling a strong shame, she jumped sharply, screamed loudly, covering her hands with a burning face, and just ran out of the tent. Lana suddenly rose that the guy whose head lay on her feet did not stay and hit his head on the ground. From such a blow he instantly appeared a lot of goal. Sly usually does not allow such, but Svai assured that he was just used to telling the truth. Then the guy turned to Makina and instructed him to cook, because Svai himself was not ready for it. Makina rejoiced in such trust and called Svao a wonderful leader, but he was a different opinion. At that moment, the formidable Miss Lantica suddenly turned to Svai and reminded that he did not forget. She was still sweet. Svai, switching his gaze to the surface, was confused. The first cat did not understand that she had found it. The next day, already on the 10th day of Soya's stay in this world, Lana had to go to the maze with her group. For the goodbye of Soya, Bento handed her a delicious dinner that he prepared. The box had a little bacon, bread, brown sauce, eggs, and, after yesterday's situation, when the Soya wanted to hold Lana, this time he did not insist, and only asked her to take care of himself. Ela, who also came to say goodbye to her sister, wished Lani good luck. He waved after her figure completely disappeared. Then he turned to Ela and offered to make up the missed workout. However, only looking at her, Sawyer noticed that something was wrong. The girl curled up and quietly apologized, asking her to take her to the tent. In a few minutes, Ella was already lying in bed. Suddenly, she said that soybeans could now capture it if she wants, because she is not able to resist. I never could understand what the girl meant. She asked Sawyer if he was experiencing her attractiveness. The girl was confident in her appearance. He understood the hint and called Elle beauty. In addition, Sawyer advised her to think about marriage after recovery. Hearing this, Ella sharply turned away from him and strongly stated that she would never be like this, because she hates chemists. Ella wondered in Soybean if he liked Lana. Such a question greatly embarrassed him. He blushed and hurried to assure that everything was not true. The guy tried to explain something to Ellie, but never found words. But Ella has already understood everything and jokingly called Soy a horrible person. Turning again, Ella asked her soul to forget everything, calling the guy a headless man. In response, Soya decided to go to train with the boss. The guy told Ellie to call him if she was hungry. Meanwhile, Soybeans already had an arrow in the target. He put a new arrow on the bowstring, but suddenly the bowstring could not stand, and broke. The guy immediately thought that everything, with shooting today. He decided to look at his stocks. There may be some thread for the bowstring, because the bowstring is the most strong thread. But there was no choice. So, although he had planned, Sawyer decided to pause for lunch. And how to solve this problem, it will think after. The man suddenly had a circle in his chest, as if by a magic wand. And I didn't understand what was happening. He just fell to the ground with pain, and I never understood what he had taken. He cast his gaze on his shadow, in which the shining eye suddenly flashed. Speaking to Soybean, he said, "I have a task for you." He froze with surprise and immediately turned to his shadow. "Who are you?" The stranger replied that it is better to perceive it as a ghost, because it comes from a bracelet, and the details do not really matter. He explained to him that descendants are in danger, and only with the help of Soybeans can they save them. Soybeans realized that he had no choice. He also warned the ghost that was not marked by much courage and asked what could help. At that moment, the shadows easily retreated sideways, and the girl's figure emerged. The ghost of the girl addressed the Soya. "I am a hero, and you, though weak, but you have a wonderful soul. I suggest making an agreement." The Soya did not immediately understand what kind of agreement it was. At that moment, the ghost looked straight into the eyes of Soya, so I did not immediately stretch what this stranger really wanted. But later she explained, "I use your body." Saying these words, the ghost seemed to enter the Soy body, penetrating through her mouth. After that, the Soya instantly found herself next to Makina and asked her to launch Isol. Meanwhile, one guy stated that he was going to go to the dungeon. On the other hand, he explained that he was now placed in the dungeon. It has become a lantern, which is now attached to the back of the fallow deer. Soybean was stunned by this news. The guy could not understand why they did it with the Isolo, but decided that now everything could be even better. Soya then appealed to Makina to establish a communication with the Hisolo. Makina promised to do her best, but warned, "A robot can only keep contact with a short time." In the end, Makina was able to make a connection, so I approached her and cast a look at the screen. At this point, the recording began. It is worth noting that one of the eyes of the Union has changed. Now it was reminiscent of the look of that ghost girl. On screen, Soybean saw the prince with his company. It was stunned by Soybean. He could not understand why Lana was with them. Suddenly, gathering all his strength, he shouted loudly, turning to the ice soul. The connection was unstable. The transmission of sound was impossible. The machine was able to obtain only the coordinates of the Isola. As it turned out, Lana was on the 10th floor of the dungeon. For a long time, Soya decided to go there immediately. But suddenly the guy remembered that his sleeve was torn, and therefore the bow became useless. He realized that first of all it was necessary to find a bow, because finding arrows was much easier. It was at this moment that a familiar voice came behind him. Get Bad came to Soybean with rich fish. He said that he was hunted with this fish with his brotherly clan and decided to share his prey with Soy. Soybeans gladly accepted the gift, but had another request to the Hetbad. Get Bad was always eager to help So this time he did not refuse. The soybean asked to sell the harpoons and urgently send him to the city. It became obvious that soybeans thought something. He was okay to give him his harpoons, and there was a difficulty with their delivery to the city. There was only one way out. At this point, Buffalo, along with her long-haired girlfriend, was sitting in the store. As always, he promised her to repay the debt after the next hike. Suddenly, the river water that flowed behind the girl's back rose into a high wall. They immediately rushed there to find out what happened. Only Soya and Goatbet were on the spot. The road to the city occupied only 330 seconds in them. From this we can conclude, Goatbet is faster than all modern submarines. For Soya, this dive was a real test. The guy was sure that he would not survive this adventure. But Goatbet assured him that it was possible to get even faster. He just is no longer young and has to wear a considerable burden. Saguya also heard the reservation. His father asked to be careful with the harpoons. They are covered with poison that paralyzes even large fish, so if you get wounded, it is not possible to move for half a day. Saguya thanked Goatbad for her useful advice. Saguya decided to rent a Borofalo gear. He was already alert. He gave them to the girl with her ears and received a Borofalo equipment, which he also handed over to the same girl. Buffalo stopped Sawi and praised the guy for a well-chosen bow. However, he explained that the bow with fixation will not stretch the usual strength of hands. This requires magical energy. Buffalo knew that such as say I had no such force. It was here that the same bracelet belonging to a strange ghost girl came to the rescue. The bracelet endowed with soybean with magical power, so the guy effortlessly pulled the bowstrings of the bow. In response, the guy praised the bow of Buffalo, calling him wonderful, and decided to rent him. In addition, he advised the wolf not to abuse alcohol. After this conversation and everything he saw, he was stunned. Meanwhile, Soye has already gone to the dungeon. On the farewell, Getbed only shouted to him that he was waiting for him in the camp, and asked him to tell him everything to the smallest details. He agreed and in a hurry moved on. 3 of his acquaintances remained, escorting him. He rushed to the dungeon because he understood he should save the bosom. Those with whom Lana had to go to the dungeon already went outside. They were about to go to eat, and suddenly Soy appeared. Some guy failed and faced his face right into the ground. He immediately returned to the soybean and began to express his indignation. Meanwhile, soybeans were already hidden by a crossbow, which he had previously taken from Bafali. At this point, elf comrades began to show dissatisfaction with him. Freysa had just neutralized their captain, but Saya understood. One hostage would be not enough. So he threatened that he would kill them all. Despite the threat, the elf was not scared at all. His eyes were filled with tears. He pleaded to save him. It was at this point that the Soya was distracted, and the healer and leader of the guild appeared on the spot. Saya and girls froze with surprise. They could not understand what Soya needs. At this point, the elf lying on the earth pleaded at least to stop the Soya, because he was convinced that this stranger would be shot. The chairman of the guild instantly ordered the elf to silence. After that, she wondered where the girl who entered with him went. It was about Lana. He asked the elf the same question. Where is Lana? The guy ordered him to tell everything, otherwise he would remain silent. The edge of the Union harpoon was just a centimeter from the elf's eye. Alpha confidently stated that he knew nothing and never saw Lana at all. So Sawa decided to contact the head of the guild to find out the truth. In search of the truth, the head of the guild began to pronounce mysterious words. Wind, the judge of war, twist, fly, find and open what is hidden in the dungeon. What is happening here today? Subsequently, it became known that the elf is the name. He returned to Maluda and asked if he was aware of what he was doing. Maluda could not find any answer. Then the animal from his team asked for permission to speak. Maluda received money from the prince for giving him the Elven princess. The agreement was made through his accomplice, a renown, named Gula. He tried to quench his friend, but he cut the conversation grossly, calling the baby worthless. After all, he actually betrayed his own people. Soya and Turin sincerely thanked the animal for the information provided, and asked the whole group to leave this place and no longer engage in any relationship with the baby. As a result, the kids left this place. Finally, they said goodbye to their worst captain, a baby. 2 men left this place. Soybean appealed to the chief to arrest the baby, and he was going to go in search of a fallow deer. However, the chief asked on which floor there is Lana. The Soybean replied, on the 10th. At the same time, He confessed that he is now only on the 5th floor. Then the chief decided to open an emergency portal for Soybean, which would move it to the 10th floor. He also ordered the urgent to call the old one. Ive immediately undertook to execute the assignments. The Soybean was left alone with the boss. He confessed that he sympathized with the princess, which is why he decided to help now. So, the chief was going to warn Soya about one important thing. If he fails to save the princess, he will have to run and forget about her forever. The girl noted, although the king may be good, he is still the prince's father. In addition, the information that the Soya passed through the portal will be destroyed. The chief allowed the boy to act at his own discretion. After all, the adventurers always choose their way. Instead, he intended to kill the prince if he was suddenly caught. All his attention was concentrated only by the permission of the chairman. Will he not deny? The head warned only one thing. The prince has a wonderful guard. The girl did not want the Soybean to die in vain. When everything was ready for departure, the head began to say, I am only a small winged son. May the completion of sacred demonic stagnation be the same crazy spark that gives birth to a dim light of hope. In a body full of powerful soul, let your name echo in my mind. My name is Lumid. I thank you for saving me from the spider and allowed the dragon to escape. I am grateful for help. Goodbye. Within a few minutes, the Soga was already on the 10th floor of the dungeon. Without spending time, he asked Isola to report the situation. The Soy greeted the boy, and the first thing he asked, how he got here. The Soybean replied that he would talk about it later. The guy immediately ordered the work to give him the coordinates of Lana. Isola accepted the team and began to pass Soybean coordinates. At that moment, Soybeans wondered in Isola what the situation. Isola replied that she was called by a guy because he was looking for ways to escape for the fallow deer. All information remained only in his memory and has not been preserved. Then Soya ordered Isola to synchronize the data and immediately began to perform the task. At this time, Soybeans were moving forward. At this point, the guy came across a girl from a royal hole. The girl asked the Soy not to go further and persistently advised him to leave this place. Suddenly, her face wrapped up deep sadness. She remembered that Soybeans had already seen Soybean. Suddenly, a sound came behind the girl's back. She looked around to find out what happened. It was at this moment that the Soybean began to remove the harpoon. The guy hit the girl on the head of the harpoon. The noise caused Isola. She noticed Soybeans and helped him cope with the girl that way. Isola supported his friend, praising his decisive action and reminding the Soybeans that he was a real defender and a fighter. It was only hope that he acted unnoticed and did not attract superfluous attention. Meanwhile, Salt, told the boy that all the monsters around the guards were already destroyed. I realized that inadvertently moving forward without a plan. That is why Sul, developed my own battle strategy. At that moment, George tried to have fun with Lana. However, she did not succumb to his courtship, which was not at all pleased by George. It is worth noting, Lana is the first woman to repel him. He called Lana underwent and asked if she knew how in the kingdom they were punished for disobedience. He was indignant. Is this all that the king's son is capable of? But George believed that adventure seekers were free people, so why not find a woman to find a woman? George wondered how much Lana could fall in love with a woman who kills others with fire. He hoped that Lana would finally seem, and then rested. The prince turned to his calm, silent laner. He hoped for his support, but Lammer refused to help. No one could predict what was hiding in the dark. The Lammer did not understand why it was necessary to deal with this here. At that moment, another girl from the group of Jorga appeared. She sought the prince to witness how her worm would instantly turn Lana into a frivolous girl. Her plan was to make Lana greedy to pleasure, so that the prince was begging for. It will be painful, as the worm will gradually eat the brain of the fallow deer. For a long time, the witch came to the fallow deer and carefully touched her end with the seine. The pathetic creature was capable of everything, even when her body was pierced by a heavy harpoon. The girl fell intentionally. The prince was confused and could not understand what was happening. The Lammer immediately oriented. She noticed the harpoon that she was flying right in the prince. Without a second, the Lammer set out a shield and defended Jorga on the other hand, taking a blow. After that, she shouted, ordering the insidious attacker to get out of the shadows and show herself. Finally, the attacker came out of the shadow. Lana froze with surprise when she saw him. The first thing Sui asked was, "Are you acting honestly?" She sought to meet Lancer in an open duel because she considered him a coward. Lammer immediately recognized Soa. At the same moment, the prince was indignant that such behavior for the common man was unacceptable. Then, Sui promised the opponents, if the Lammer was able to protect himself from his arrows, he will disappear forever. Otherwise, the foreigner will destroy everything that Prince value. He accepted the union and tuned to the battle. The fight began, instantly planted a new harpoon on Luke's bowstring, and released him into flight. She cleverly covered the shield and immediately went on the offensive. Soibo did not stop pushing on the enemy, without stopping harpoons. She managed to evade all attacks of the union. She cleverly jumped and evaded, so none of his attacks reached the hole. One day, Sawa was still able to break the lawn shield. However, the dancer did not get lost and confidently moved forward to the boy, moving in the rhythm of freestyle. She cleverly evaded the harpoons even in jumping. The girl ran to the soybean and put the sword on his neck. The soybeans frozen in place. The girl noted that the main mistake of soybean is the excessive care of the fallow deer. It was because of this that Lancer considered him a bad Kim. Soybeans thanked Lancer for such an assessment, but this was not over. Suddenly, George's shoulder stirred up, and he shouted in pain. This cry immediately attracted the attention of Lenner. The girl turned sharply and looked at George. At that moment, Arpoon rushed to Lenner. Her helmet took off her head, and she fell to the ground. All this time, only a holographic image fought from Lancer, and the real consequence finally emerged from the shadow. The Isel helped to manage the hologram. At this point, Lenner began to be pleading with the solid. Lancer allowed Sale to do everything he desires with her. Instead, she asked for only one thing, to spare the prince. It did not bother it at all. He just hit the laner on his head, pushed the girl to the side and moved on. Jor couldn't even move. He did not understand what was happening to his body. Soybeans, which had already approached him, explained. It was a paralyzing toxin, which is commonly used for large fish. Instead, the guy was certain. Soy just did not realize what he was doing. He promised that he would not tell all his father if Soy released him. But it was indifferent. He was not going to make concessions. Soybeans are just a newcomer among adventure seekers, and is now on the 5th floor. He came here through the emergency portal, so he left no trace after himself. Lana got permission to go for intelligence. Now Sawa only has to say goodbye to George, because the body of the prince is certainly clearing the monster. Who will believe that the stranger won the prince and his guards? This will be the revenge of Sawa. The desire of the boy to kill the prince only intensified after he learned of Jorga's intentions about Lana. Jorg assured that he only tried to do something, but did not have time to accomplish. He saw enough. That is why he was now ready to destroy this defenseless imprint. At this point, the boy stopped Lana. Soybean couldn't understand why she was doing it, because the prince had just mocked her. However, it was more important for Lana. Soybean saved her, and George had only one shot, so the situation was no longer so critical. In the end, Soya forced George at least to apologize to Lana. George did not want to apologize until he remained stirred with fear. At this point, I noticed that another group was approaching us. George advised Soybeans to quickly collect his arrows and move on. This time, Soya allowed George to apologize next time, but the guy strictly warned the prince. If he touches Lana again, he would kill him. Soy even swore his own life. Saying goodbye to Jorg, Soy and Lana left the dungeon. Suddenly, Lana stopped. The Soy looked around and turned to the girl with surprise. Lana apologized before him. Her legs were still hurting. Finally, Sawa decided to lift the girl in his arms, assuring that it is not difficult for him. Not the best moment, but Sawa still invited Lana to join his team. It was not necessary to think for a long time. Lana agreed almost immediately. She did not know that she would receive such an offer, but she was sincerely pleased to join the Soyuz group team. Returning from the dungeon, Soy and Lana went to the camp. In the tent of Machina immediately demanded a study report. Soybean briefly told about the work done. They got the 10th floor, although it will not officially be fixed. Among the participants, Gitbad from Magubaflu also provided his help. The Adventure Guild and the Trade Association adhered to neutrality, while Prince Lemuria opposed them, standing on the side of enemies. The artificial intelligence carefully processed everything that the pillar told. Due to the information obtained, the likelihood of success of his operation increased from 0.6% to 2%. The Soy glowed with joy. Even such 2% became a huge achievement for him. Anna also believed that the growth was significant, although the total figure remained small. She concluded that the Union detachment really has great potential. Soya himself realized that he managed to achieve this result not only on his own efforts. The support of Isola and the Machina was significant. It was also worth considering. So Isola decided not to stretch the conversation, which was already uninformative, and quickly transferred it to another topic. After all, if you look on the other hand, the probability of failure was 98%. I have encountered such situations too often, and I understood well. A sober assessment of circumstances is the first step to success. After consulting with the Makana, they decided that the Isola would behave kindly. Soy continued to boil himself for his careless attitude to his weapons, the waste of resources for food, and was especially annoyed when food was suddenly not. He ignored all the advice of Makina and Isola. They have repeatedly warned, if Soy continues to spend strength on the rescue of others, and even more so, will show compassion even to enemies, it will turn into great trouble for him. They will claim that Soy again received a new force, losing his main weapon. This was not possible to achieve other units, but one important insidiousness is hidden here. Solo was angry with Soya, because he created a huge problem. The situation is so serious that Makina simply blocks Isol if he opens the whole truth. That is why Isola decided to remain silent. This is used by Makina, because the lack of criticism gives her a wonderful chance to eliminate Soy. Now Isols have only one question for Soya. Will he give up the task for his speech? The Soya firmly answered, no. He insisted that it was his main goal. Will only refuse when there is no chance. He was not surprised to hear such words from soybeans. Moreover, he even had his own saying about this. Only the one who does nothing is not mistaken. I advised the soybeans a little in sleep. Still, today it was a strong wind, and it coped perfectly with its task. The morning of the 11th day of soybean in this world began with the arrival of Father Aves to the camp. Tycho apologized in advance for his early visit, but Soya calmly assured that everything was fine. He just wondered what reason Tycho appeared. He realized that the situation had come to a dead end, but despite everything, he agreed to go to the king. Just in case, he asked the Hayak whether it was possible to bring a weapon with you. Hayak replied that yes, traveling with weapons is not uncommon. Hajak asked in Soybeans and Fallow Deal, whom they brought to each other. This issue was caught by Soybeans by surprise and embarrassed, while Lana kept calm. She explained Hayak that there was no relationship between her and Soya. Soon the carriage with Soybe and Lana was already rolled to the royal castle. Once inside, they were welcomed by friends. Suddenly, from the shadow, a lazy appeared. She politely appealed to Hayak to talk to Soya alone. He allowed Hayak, but he noted that Laner does not detain Soybean for a long time, because they came to the king's audience. Soy and Lana departs away from everyone to talk to the Lancer. Soybeans recognized the girl. Yesterday she was in armor. The Lammer introduced himself, and first of all apologized. He assured her that everything is fine and not to remember the past. However, Lager stressed that she was not turning to Lana, but to Soybean from Japan. After that, he stated that he was not going to forgive the Laner if she came only to apologize. Having said this, Soy asked the Laner whether she had any questions left. But it seems that she had no questions, so she decided to go immediately to the main topic. Lammer explained that the prince initiated the challenge of Soybeans and Fallow Deal. The prince confessed that he sought to apologize personally before the king of Lemuria and the owner of the elves. After these words, the Lammer asked the guys if legends confidently claim that they are not just a conflict ahead of them, but a real war. These words changed the expression of Soybeans and Fallow Deer. Some, on the contrary, argued that most elves do not even want to listen to human problems, and the king prefers to leave everything as it is and allow the events to develop on their own. Now, the royal family in So has a lot of disputes with vassals. It was decided that during the war, adventurers were mobilized as soldiers. After that, one girl asked Lana if she wanted her home to burn again. The answer was quite obvious. Of course, Lana did not want it. Lana looked disappointed. Then they turned to Lander, asking if she wanted this war. The Laner only noted that the war would not bring a useful kingdom. She only wanted the king to remain healthy, despite his good age and poor health. Soybo looked Lancery right in her face and felt that the girl was hiding something. At that moment, Lancer turned to Soybean, saying that she heard about his wisdom and dislike for conflicts. The girl asked the young man to stop the prince's intentions, but Soybo confessedly confessed that he did not know how to influence this situation alone. Suddenly, their conversation was interrupted by Hayak. The boys mocked for too long, so he was forced to intervene. Finally, Lancer again addressed Soybeans with one request, after which he left. On the left of her, Soybean turned to the Isola. Isola listened carefully to the whole conversation and immediately realized what was the matter. Everything went exactly as he predicted yesterday. Then, together with Machina, they calculated 5,000 different scenarios to prevent war. The war seemed inevitable. That is why the works apologized to Soya. They could not find a different way. At that moment, Lana stated that she had a plan. Hearing this, the Soybean was surprised. Lana assured that everything is true, but before that, she had one question to Soybean. Lana wondered at the boy if he had a bride or a sweetheart at home. Soybean frankly replied that he had only a younger sister. Lana understood everything right away and noted that it was wonderful. However, Soy did not realize what she was leading to. A little time has passed. Soybean and Lana were already sitting at one table with the king. First of all, His Majesty apologized to the boys for such an impolite and unexpected meeting. Undoubtedly, it was the request of his meaningless son. Sawyer realized that now the king was turning to him, and next to him sits Lana's father. George was also at the table. At that moment, the king turned to the fallow deer and asked how to work. He understood that the life of a traveler was full of difficulties. He also noted that Lana had lost weight, but she hurried to assure him that everything was fine with her was only in light. She then turned to Soybean and asked how he had. The king already knew that the Soybean had arrived from a distant country, so the guy bowed politely and said that he was glad to meet him. He also introduced himself and explained that he came from far from Japan. Smiling, he noted that he likes a bold look on the Soybean face. The king acknowledged that he would like to know more about the boy's country when he would be able to talk to him again. Then he turned to Horga, wanting to find out why he insisted on the presence of everyone in this hall. They suggested that this could concern Leonard's wounding. However, George insisted that this issue could be discussed later. However, the king was different. He understands George with understanding and ordered both George himself and the Elven princess immediately. In response, he stated that he would reveal the cause of the injury to the laner only when the king is gathering everyone in this hall. The lammer is as stubborn as her mother. If she decided something, he will perform, even if you have to go through the fire and flames. The whole situation seems suspicious. Why is the king so worried about the maid alone? At that moment, he continued to talk to his son, saying that George sees the symbol of their kingdom every day. The bull embodies the evil king, and the silver fox is the mother of Alon who died, defending the monarch. If the law were different, Laner's mother would consider George's eldest sister. The king only wondered if George felt at least something, realizing what injury he had suffered. At that moment, a stream was poured with a stream. He suddenly realized that he would die before the start of the war. Feeling inevitability, the guy apologized to his younger sister in advance, because he probably would never see her brother again. Lana stated that she has a great news. The king was suspicious if he would not have to listen to some nonsense again. He doubted whether Lana was sometimes not trying to deceive him, but she assured that she did not even think of misleading. Lana accused Laugh that he had crippled the Soybean. These words stunned him, because if you look at the situation in this way, it turns out that Lana had just convinced Soya for death. Lana was also not delighted with this news, and said that the day before they encountered a dungeon with a group of princes. Although it was extremely inadvertent, then there was no way to retreat. The king asked the cause, and Lana replied that she did all this for recognizing her engagement with Soil. Her confession was a real surprise for everyone, but most of all, it was stunned by Soila Helm, who had no idea about any engagement. The reason from which Saya and Lana were challenged by the prince's team was the desire to be officially recognized by Lana. It was well known that marriage between gamers and elves was forbidden in Gyre forests. However, now Lana was only an adventure search, so she had to obey the laws of the king of adventurers. Despite this, Lana did not want to bother the king because of the whims of the princess who lost her dignity. Everyone was convinced that they were in a dead end, and suddenly Prince George said, "Try to win me if you could. If you prove my correctness by force, I will interfere with the king myself." Listening to these slander, George was confused and even trembling with fear, so did not understand anything. This time, they assured that they were fighting with soybeans. But before the prince and desperation of Laner Magic Lana and archery from the soybean were in vain. The girl confessed that they were ready to surrender with Soya. Soybean raised her hand and said that the last arrow, released by both of them, gained the support of loggers. This is how the soybeans managed to break the shield of the list. Vana added that the great prince had admitted his defeat, seeing this miracle. That is why Soybeans and Van are here today. He heard amazed George to the heart. At this point the king turned to Lanzer and asked if it was true. Lammer confirmed that it was really true. The last arrow, which was fired by Savi and Lana, was the same as the one who at one time overcame the great spider of Lola. She assured that she witnessed the birth of this legend. In gratitude, the king decided to thank his son. He believed that George, despite the danger, fulfilled the will of the people. So the prince proved that it is worthy of becoming a real king. He confessed that George was light-hearted because of his carefree life, but children grow older. It is only necessary to look away for a moment. Such difficult words of his father were deeply moved by George, and tears converted to his eyes. That is why I like this exciting story so much. Even it became a little annoying that all this is only empty inventions. This moment, for the first time in the whole time, Lana's father spoke. He argued that he had more important things than to spend time on a common man at the fair. He wanted to deny the king of the elves named Melm, but he just decided to leave. He stated that his daughter was already dead, and now he is only a handful of travelers. Finally, Elf stressed that this issue concerns exclusively the king of the Lemurians. Going out, the Monet slammed the door. After that, the king decided to formally certify the engagement of the newlyweds. As the first monarch of Lemuria, His Majesty Lemuria al-Armagist solemnly confirmed the engagement. He then asked the fallow deal whether she would hold a ceremony according to the Elven traditions. Lana gladly answered what she would do. Then he decided to leave some of the money. He instructed the association. The king was aware that marriage between representatives of different races would certainly meet many difficulties. So he urged the newlyweds to go on this journey together, the only team and with faith in each other. Sun with confidence answered only one word. Of course. Soy's sister seems to be your older brother going to marry. Returning to the camp, Lana began to apologize to Soya and immediately apologized. The soybean was stunned by such an unexpected scene. Lana explained that she learned from Makina and Mrs. Laniki. When you ask for the most sincere apology, you need to get around you. She was even more surprised. What is Makina and Mrs. Lannik's teaching about the Union's country? Meanwhile, Lana was in a hurry to justify. They say it showed carelessness and became the cause of this event without even learning about the true feelings of soybeans. The girl realized that she again involved him in trouble just when she thought she had fully thanked him. Lana felt that she had gone too far, even if her act was to avoid a blood box. She felt not worth the love of Soya, but despite this, she could not give up the words spoken to the king. The girl understood it perfectly. That is why Lana asked Soy only to resort to her husband until in his life. Someone who would love for real will appear in his life. I fever from surprise. What does it mean to give? The guy realized that it was only a fictitious marriage, but he needed to think well. At that moment, Makina approached Soybeans and wondered if he was ashamed to make a girl say such things. There was an Isolo nearby. He also turned to Soybean, calling to behave as a real man, because they are in one team. On the other hand, he stressed that if the hero is now, then they will have to let him go from. Despite his strong excitement, Soybeans still decided one step. He reached out to the fallow deer and turned to her loudly. Starting on one knee and gently taking the girl by the hand, the young man made her an offer, whether jokingly or seriously. When Ella woke up, she saw Soybean and fallow deer. The girl wondered where they were. Lana looked gently at her sister and reassured her, asking not to worry. Then Ella suddenly stated that she was going to marry Soybeans. At that moment, her shock did not know the limits. On the 13th day of Soybean in this world, the heroes staged a great holiday. Many guests were invited to the feast, including the buffalo merchant. Ella was not among the guests. She was lying in bed, and the only thread for her was a conversation with Soya, which could tell everything that happened around. The girl was desperately upset that she could not get to her sister's wedding. She joking. For this moment, she could no longer move her feet. According to the device, the ball went through the abdomen and pierced the pelvic bone. The only way to save Elle is an urgent operation that involves opening the abdominal cavity and removing the damaged organ. Ella did not want the soybean to worry. The girl assured her friend that the guy would be able to sell her things if they were superfluous. Or Ella herself, After all, the dead are even dead. Then soybeans do not have to worry about the funeral. All that Ella dreamed of is that soybeans would return at least one strand to her native forest. While the father or brother tried to humiliate Soya, Ella only wanted the guy to send them wherever. That's all. Choosing an ally, Ella asked him to take care of Long. She no longer regret anything. She was sure of that. In this case, Soy asked the girl to give him his life. Ella was well aware that the purpose of Soybean came into this world was his younger sister. Soy heard this conversation when he came out of the tent, and immediately turned to Makina, asking if he understood everything. Makina replied that it could unpack the recovery program, because access to this information is necessary for the operation. So Soye asked Makin to prepare and start preparing for surgery. At this point, Isola turned to Soybean, noting that he needed confirmation. After the compilation is completed, it will no longer be possible to make a complete recovery. So Isola wanted to make sure that Soye was really confident in his decision. If so, he continued the Isola. What is your answer? In response, SOC strongly confirmed his readiness. Isola realized that this was the answer that would give Sob. At that moment, Makina announced that all the preparatory steps have already been completed, and they can immediately start surgery. Then someone wondered what the chances of the success of the operation. Makina confidently stated, 100%. After all, soybeans give commands, and the system performs them perfectly. It was at this moment that a message from Isol came. Having reviewed the memories of the old world, she found a valuable mention of emergency surgery, albeit 40-year-old, but useful for their mission. This should increase the chances of success by 20%. In such a situation, Soy was ready to trust Isol and Makini. It was he who relied on them to save El. Makina promised soybeans to do her best to meet his hopes for them. Pastes and soybeans appeared in this world. Sunny day. Soybeans, as always, prepared for all lunch, and together with Makina they mentioned the past. Nina said that this trip is always associated with risk, because at any moment you can lose life. Therefore, Makina believed that detailed records should be left, and I agreed with this idea. However, with the name for these chronicles, there were difficulties. The options that were proposed were not suitable. Everything because of copyright and similar restrictions. I wanted Soya to invent something that could interest people and encourage them to know more. Thinking about it, he heard a familiar voice behind his back. Hey, did you finish cooking? Ella was alive, healthy, and of course, hungry. After that operation, her wound healed completely. It is impossible to say that it was a miracle, all thanks to the apparatus and method of ice salt. It was difficult to predict how modern anesthetics and medicines from the soybean world would affect the body of El. However, the days passed quietly, and the boys carefully watched Ella. In her opinion, they were even too caring. Today they go to the dungeon again. Vanna and Ella have a great appetite, so it was a true joy. Today, soybeans may cook the student if it is possible to hug the boar in the dungeon. It was at this point that Soya brought Maka from thinking and reminded him of inventing the name for her memories. The poppy woke up and apologized before Mahina. In response, she reminded Soye that the name should be really cool. In addition, Mahina promised that they would make the choice of soybeans and not criticize his decision. You didn't want to delve too much into it. She wanted to leave everything simple. That is why, without hesitation, Soy decided to name these memories. A foreigner passes nearby and throws a coin.